There is a dungeon that has a labyrinth full of horrifying monsters lurking inside, and it can be called a fantasy. Moreover, there is a friendship that spans from early childhood between a boy and a girl, in a sense, is a fantasy. In a certain dungeon, a boy is holding a sword to mess with some monsters. He removes every single monster out of the way that interrupts his way and keeps moving forward towards a dungeon. After removing the monsters, he says he is almost there. He is a 17-year-old swordsman, and for a certain goal, this young man has ventured into the depths of the dungeon. He keeps moving inside, which is the deepest part. In there, the dungeon's kind, their king is waiting. Van goes in there, in the Dragon King's chamber, and the dragon welcomes him. It is a black dragon known as Obsidian. After seeing the young man, the dragon says that it shall be the opponent, but Van stays quiet and stares directly in the eyes of it. Then the dragon says to Van that he is sweating buckets there and laughs at him, and Van tells it not to say that. The outside of the dungeon is really hot, and then he asks the dragon if it can cool him with its wings. The dragon agrees to cool him, and Van feels much better after cooling down. Then the dragon says that it doesn't want to go back to the human world, and Van asks the dragon why is it in its dragon form anyway, and what is with that speech, some kind of role play? The dragon says it is because they haven't seen each other for a while, it wants to surprise him for a bit, but Van isn't surprised at all, so the dragon says it will change back to human right away, as Van is no fun. The human inside changes back to normal, and it is a girl known as Ryuka. Van casually gives the bag his mother gave to him and tells Ryuka that it is from his mother. Ryuka opens the bag to see what is inside and sees veggies, so she says she thought she told him that she can only eat meat, but as it is from Auntie, she decides to eat it. Van tells her that she has to eat nutritional balance and says their turtles at home eat veggies too. Ryuka says she is a dragon though, and says thanks to him for bringing in the food, and then asks Van if he wants to drink. Van agrees to drink it. Ryuka is the strongest black dragon king, and Van is the only young man who conquered this dungeon, and both of them are childhood friends. While eating, Van tells her when he came here, her subordinates always play along with him and ask if she can do something about it. Ryuka shockingly asks if they are tough for him, and he says no, it is just that every time he comes to visit, he has to beat them up every single time, and he feels sorry for them. Ryuka tells him it is their job as dungeon monsters, and then a monster asks the others if it didn't tell them that Van Kun is their king's friend, so it is rude to try and hit him. The monster, who always tries to beat Van, says that it cannot be helped because they are only doing their jobs, and they have to check anyone that enters the dungeon. The monster says that it failed to check Van, and the monster asks it, if Mino-san is really earnest, isn't he in them? A girl monster tells them to keep their voice low, or they will be heard. The monster gossip that Ryuka and Van already know each other for 10 years, and Van Kun's house is far, so they can only meet once a month. All the monsters keep looking at them and say childhood friends are great, and the girl monster says she also had her time in the past like that, and all of them say that she is lying. Meanwhile, Van says to Ryuka that it is time for him to go, and she thanks him for bringing the vegetables for her and asks if it isn't too soon to go home right now. She tells him that she already prepared the game for them to play, and he replies he has to go home because he has a lot of things to do today. Every single monster thinks that their synchronization level is amazing. And then Ryuka says to Van that she can see and it cannot be helped to stop him for a while to play a game with her. Ryuka asks him to confirm if he is going to come next month, but he asks how about tomorrow, and then he says sorry to her for not telling her that there is a town near this dungeon, and he joined the Adventurers Guild there. From today, he will be living there. Ryuka is shocked, and she asks if he lives nearby for real. He says being an adventurer has always been his dream, and he was wondering if he can do it here, while all the monsters are thinking that it means he can visit every day. Ryuka excitedly asks him if he moved here because he wanted to see her every day, and asks if he got lonely or what. She asks him if he doesn't have friends beside her, and he tries to say something, but she says, well, it cannot be helped, and allows him to come here anytime. Both of them say goodbye to each other, and Ryuka says she will see him tomorrow. All the monsters think they're such an odd pair, but still their time together is so cute. All of them say it is time for them to get back to their positions and decide that they are going to support those two childhood friends. And some of them say that they will be beaten up to a pulp as a result and will have to bear the physical wounds. And the girl monster says it cannot be helped because it is Minosan after all. The head monster says that it will beat them all up for saying such things about them. On the bottom floor of a certain dungeon, all the monsters are sitting together on a table, and Ryuka asks them to give her the report. Then one of the monsters tells her that yesterday, adventurers entered down the 7th and 8th floors. And the other monster says that they were all C ranks, and they were able to recover some power from them. The girl monster says even the new ones are making it pretty far, maybe it is time to change up the traps. And Ryuka asks them why not have the 1st Division handle that and find and see if it helps with, which everyone in there agrees. Ryuka asks the Lady Dragon Queen if she agrees, but she is spacing out at the moment. The other monster tells Ryuka that she is not listening at the moment, and she just keeps looking at the clock. The Lady Dragon Queen then says it is no small wonder, and Ryuka panics that it is about time for Van to come. The Lady Queen says since she will be able to see him every day, then why doesn't she try for a little progress? Ryuka yells at her that it is not like that, and then the monster asks her to relax, as the announcers will tell them if any adventurers show up. And Ryuka says it is not like she is waiting for him or anything, and the monster agrees with her. Ryuka tries to clarify that Van is just a friend and tells them that was 10 years ago when she was traveling with her family when she got caught in a storm and was stranded alone. She couldn't fly because of her injuries and she was at a loss for what to do. Then Van showed up and asked her if she was okay, and he rescued her, after which they became best friends. They had fun playing together every day, but at night she would get homesick and cry. Van left the village all by himself to help her find a home, and it was a hard journey. Van told her that he was so surprised when she turned in a person, and she laughed. Then he said he was so glad that he found her family. She replied that she was thankful, and that is when they parted ways. Van told her next time he would get to her home and then they could play together. Meanwhile, all the monsters ask her if it is precious, and she says, since then, she became a dungeon boss, and Van got stronger so he could come to see her, and she is completely used to it now. Ryuka says that she has thought about it ever since then. She has, and tells them that it is it, and this is the end of the story. She says they are just childhood friends and nothing more, and all the monsters thank her for telling them all this. Ryuka asks them angrily if they got it, and the Lady Monster Queen says that she is so full right now, and the big monster says, that is too cool for a 7-year-old, and who wouldn't fall for him? Ryuka asks them to listen to her, and all the monster says it is scary when she only transforms that part, and tells her that it doesn't think she should let Van see that face, and Ryuka tells him to shut it. Meanwhile, an announcement is made that a new adventurer has entered the dungeon, and Ryuka transforms back to normal. The number of dangers within this dungeon is unfathomable, but everyday adventurers come seeking fame and riches. So far, the best adventurers have only made it to the 45th floor because it is a huge dungeon with over 100 floors and all the usual monsters and traps. One of the monsters says to Ryuka that she doesn't have to get so jittery because it can tell when it is Van, and another announcement is made that a few adventurers have entered the dungeon. The announcement keeps going till the 8th floor, and the monster says, there he is. And the Lady Monster says she is turning off the announcer. All the monsters leave, and the monster has a goal to hold Van for 10 minutes, and Ryuka tells them to have fun. While she is all alone in there, Van enters, and she is shocked at how he came here so fast. He asks her if she is in the middle of something. Ryuka says not at all, and it is totally fine. She asks him if he made sure to record his log, and he says yes. Like usual, he did record it. Van keeps laughing, so she asks him what is so funny, and he says he was just thinking that he is going to Bach here tomorrow too, just like old times. Ryuka finds it gross and asks what is up with that, and he says she doesn't have to go that far, and says he means even she. He saw that smile on her face when he left, and he gets she has been all alone too, and basically stuck in this dungeon. Both of them smile at each other, and all the monsters who are spying at them also smile. In a certain dungeon, Ryuka and Van are playing a game. She brings another queen with whom her harem of the queen, Undine, and a tsundere female knight is complete, and the victory is hers. Van says it is not happening so fast as he has the world's most powerful wizard's master, as well as the magic as family. His standing is through the roof, and both of them keep playing while the monsters are thinking about what are they doing. It is a game in which the player aims for the strongest rebirth, and using dies the player gathers allies and messes with, and the monster thinks it seems pretty fun. Van makes his move and says that Ryuka's allies took her out of the party and also took all her money. The monsters think, why is Van so happy? The other one tells him to mess withing back and gives him the buff, and it is pretty strong. While a monster says it doesn't really like that, it is a bad way to live. And the head monster tells him that it is a game, he doesn't know what the youngsters like, but there's no reason to get uppity about it. He tells the monster to look at the dragon lady, she is so happy, and Ryuka says that the heroine is unfaithful to the mannered hero and her mass hurting mode is activated. The monster says to leave it as it is, a terrible game, and the monster says it is great, they are having fun, but there is no love. They are both 17 now. Normally one has more progress by now at this rate. They are never going to share their love. And then Ryuka says in the game that it is where she is going to come in and put them all in a mood, as she is a half man and a half bird, and their songs have the ability to charm anyone who hears them. Van says it is not that he ever tried, and she plays the song, due to which Van gets close to her and says he feels strange, and looking at her is making him feel hot. She says her confidence is tight and asks him to come close to her and hold her tightly. The monsters yell their names, and Ryuka says this is dangerous. The idea alone is making her nervous, and the monsters think, what is she thinking about that is dangerous? Wulkan interferes and says that personally, he doesn't think it is going to work out that way and wants to watch their wholesome, bitter, and sweet days. It asks, what are they going to do if forcing them to share love ruins their relationship? They wouldn't be able to watch them love as they do right now. And the monsters agree with its point. The lady monster says that she knows that and she wants to keep watching over them, of course, but there are 10 years worth of feelings, so even if it is by force, she wants to give the lady dragon queen some happiness. Wool says if she is thinking that much about her, then it will not say anything more, but it doesn't think love-sharing stuff is the right way to go about this, so it is leaving. Meanwhile, Ryuka says that she wants to see this scene full of happiness, and the monster asks her not to add in her own emotions so casually now, because that is absolutely her priority. The lady monster takes out a guitar and starts to play, and the other monster is suddenly really worried. The lady monster asks them to plug their ears. She doesn't want any roses to grow, and there is no stopping now. She begins to play the acoustic guitar, which is supposed to get them in a mood, but Van's and Ryuka's heads start to spin. The monsters think they are reacting, and it is going to work, but Van cannot take it anymore, and Van says what has Harpy-san been doing is bad, and he has no idea if she is practicing or singing, and the real ones are incredible. It has been a while since he heard one, but why is she over there singing? In this world, half man and half birds are largely split into two categories: sirens and harpies. Sirens are the half man, half bird with beautiful bodies and voices whose songs fascinate people to the point of madness, and the harpies are half man, half bird with horrifying bodies and voices. They are awful birds that sing for meat, and she is one of the awful ones. The lady monster asks them how they know about it, and the other one tells her that it is in her name. Then Wool enters and asks how did it go, and the monster says there is no need to worry because it was a failure. While they are debating, Ryuka asks what she thinks she is doing, and she says to them not to tell her that they were looking at them the whole time, and calls them idiots angrily. She says they are all going to be no more, and Van asks her to go easy on them. Then Van asks them all why don't they come with them and play with them instead, because the more people, the more fun it is, and the monster asks if they should play with them. The monster asks each other what to do, and one of them says that it is all right for them to join and they should leave them alone. Wool says that it will be crowded with 6 people. Mino-san is huge and Okun is fat. The lady monsters push them all to play, and all of them sit together to play the game. Meanwhile, Ryuka tells Van that his shoulders are touching her, and he says he cannot help it, there are too many people here, and she guesses it is fine. The monsters tell them to wipe the smile off their faces. Indeed, wholesomeness is the best. Ryuka gives the 9th volume to Van so that he can read it, and he takes it. She is giving him this book because she knows that he will not be able to stop and will come crying to her, asking to let him read the next volume. And he says that is kind of scary, actually. When she gives him the book, she tells him to read it, and he says he heard her and says goodbye to her. After he leaves, Ryuka stays quiet for a bit, and the monster says, "It is another precious day." The lady monster calls the queen, so Ryuka gets angry and asks, "What is it all of a sudden?" Ryuka says she might have pushed too hard on him, and she is worried he might have been annoyed by her lending him so much at once, and she wonders if he will read it. Meanwhile, the monster thinks how delicate she is, and they find her cute like this. Then Wolkhunt says he was sure it was fine since it was her recommendation, and she said still she shouldn't have done that. Then the lady monster says to her that, in other words, she wants to watch Van read, so all she has to do is to be with him around the clock and get married to him. Ryuka is too worried about it, so one of the monsters tells her that it has something that might help her and brings the magical monitor. It says that something like this might happen, so it made this out of parts from the dungeon. Okun is the one who brought the monitor, and he is in charge of the dungeon traps. Okun turns on the monitor and tells her that it can show Van Kun in real life while he will be none the wiser, and it can also record. The other monster asks what is recording, and the lady monster tells him that it is basically the same as his average crystal ball, and Okun says that Ryuka can keep an eye on Van's doings. Then Ryuka says that she is not sure, but she doesn't really like the idea of peeping on someone's life like this, and she is not like them. She keeps peeping at Van while he is reading The Boom at night, and then he yawns. Van says the book is good, and Ryuka has good taste in books, and now it is late, so he should sleep now. The next day, Van comes to meet Ryuka and tells her that the book was really good and he is going to read the next one today. Ryuka laughs and says she knows. The monsters are peeping at them, and they say it is good that the lady queen had no cause for worry, and everyone appreciates Okun. Then the lady monster says that she wants to have a look at that monitor herself, and Okeko says it is one of a kind, so it is a no. He is sure that she has something terrible in mind and calls her an idiot bird. The lady monster says that there is nothing bad in her mind, and she just wants to peep on him bathing, and Okun says that is what he means. Van leaves, and Ryuka peeps on him again while he is humming a song. He eats veggies again, so she says that he should eat some meat now. 3 days later, she becomes a girl who peeps on him, and the dragons ask her what is she doing. The lady monster says she thought that she was acting weird, but she has been peeping on Van Kun this entire time. Ryuka says that it means that Van doesn't talk much about his personal life, so she thinks maybe he is hiding something, like maybe he found a new girlfriend and was having fun with them instead. So she started watching him, but for the last 3 days, other than him being here, she hasn't seen him get close to any girl. But then she thought maybe he grumbles about her in his sleep. The monster thinks she is too extreme and is the type to never relent when something is bothering her. Ryuka says that might be so, but doesn't Van look kind of down? He was up late yesterday reading again, so maybe he just needs sleep. His face is so sullen. And then the monster asks her, how about turning the monitor off and looking in the mirror? Meanwhile, some guys meet Van and say to him that they will hear him out, while the monsters in the dungeon are thinking, who are they? Wool says they are guild adventurers and he has beaten them up quite a few times. On the other side, Van tells them that his childhood friend has been feeling down. When he saw her yesterday, she had bags under her eyes and he wonders if she cannot sleep. The monster says they are both worried about the same thing, so talk about charm points. Then Ryuka says to Van indirectly that this is nothing for her and he is so silly that he worries too much, while the people who came to meet Van say that it does sound concerning and asks if that childhood friend is a girl. Van tells them that she is a girl, and the guys ask him to let them meet her sometime because he will never get this chance again to meet a real-life female friend. The monster gets super happy and they say that they are not going to allow these guys near the Lady Dragon Queen, and Wool tells him to down a notch. Then Okun says that this is something else when it comes to imagining bad situations, while Van tells the guys that he will not let them meet her, and Mino-san angrily says to Van to tell them he will not allow them to meet her. The guy asks why not. A quick glimpse is fine, and the other guy tells him to give it up as he is bothering Van. Then he says sorry to Van because the guy just has no luck with women. He is a broken, sad little man. While Van thinks there is no way he can let him meet Ryuka. Okun gets happy that Van said no to them and says he protected the Lady Queen from those evil fellows. And then the guy in the mask says to Van that it will not do it any good to just sit here and worry, because if he just talks with her, he will see there is nothing to worry about. Ryuka thinks she should just stop peeping on him and should talk with him too, and Wool says he believes that will be for the best. Mino-san says that the Lady Dragon Queen was close to becoming the one to peep at Van every time, and Ryuka says she wasn't peeping on him at all, she was just a little curious. Then Okun says that it is good that this monitor doesn't give itself away, and they see Van looking at someone. Okun is sure that it was a coincidence, and then Van says, lately he has been sensing this presence. Okun says in order to transmit the image, he did have to use a tiny bit of magical energy, but surely they underestimated Van Kun's perception. He has been in this so long that his senses are better than Wool's. Van is staring directly into the camera, and Ryuka breaks the monitor with her dragon tail because she doesn't want to see Van glaring at her. Van then meets her and says if she was worried about that, he would not read the books. If he didn't want to, he would have told her and said that she was so worried that she lost sleep. Ryuka says that she has also been staying up late reading. At the entrance of a certain dungeon, the novice adventurer Van, a childhood friend of the Black Dragon Ryuka, is how he makes it down to the bottom floor. He goes in there and says, it is another day and another clear, and activates his force to run. All the monster says is that he is here and they shouldn't flatter and meet him head on. Van breaks some sort of puzzle door and wonders what Ryuka wants to do today. Maybe she wants to play chess or cards, and fishing on the 85th floor could be fun. Van makes plans along the way. The 27th floor is a cave, and when he goes there, a girl is already waiting for him over there. He sees her in half clothes and she wants his help. He asks her if she is all right, and she says she is in the monster's hands. They remove her clothes and her companions abandon her. Van feels really sorry to hear that and gives her some healing herbs that will help her. He walks away and tells her to take care of herself, and the girl yells at him that he cannot leave her alone like this and wants him to take her to the entrance. Van thinks Ryuka is waiting for him, but it cannot be helped, and he tells her to come here, and the girl thinks everything is working according to the plan. She says there isn't a boy alive who wouldn't fall for her if she keeps doing things like these to them. Van picks her up and she asks him to put her down and not to treat her like luggage, and he says he can make it back like this if he runs. However, she says this is a 27th floor and she doesn't think her body will make it and thinks she needs to calm down. She thinks she will absolutely defeat this troublesome adventurer and she will show the Lady Dragon Queen that she can be useful. Her name is Suki-san. She is a monster that uses man and then takes their life energy. Van takes her to the surface and she asks him to wait because she is tired and she doesn't want to go home yet tonight. Van says it is noon and she yells that she read the mood a little, and this is why he is not popular, and she bets he doesn't even have any friends, let alone a girlfriend. Van asks her why is she throwing shade after asking for his help, and thinks there is something off about her. The monster came up to check on him as he got pretty late, but they found him with a girl, so they say it is pretty weird. Okun says that is a girl that was appointed here recently, and the lady monster says, of all men, she is trying to have Van Kun. Then Wool says that only they and the Lady Dragon Queen's parents know that they are childhood friends. And the Lady Monster asks if they should go and tell her, but Okun says absolutely not. To keep an order in the dungeon, no one but them can ever know. And if the humans found out, Van standing as an adventurer would be in danger. It is the will of the board of directors, so for now they must watch. Wall says he doesn't think that just one person knowing would be that bad though, and asks Mino-san what he thinks about it. Mino-san is super angry at that girl because she is trying to get between childhood friends, so he wants to punish her. Mino hates all the girls like her, and Okine asks him to hold on. He thinks it is great that he can express that, and the lady monster says not to indulge him. If Van got done in by the likes of her, then he doesn't know about the Lady Queen. And Wool says that he doesn't think it will be a problem and asks them to look over there. Suki-san opens her legs, and Van asks her what is she trying to do. The lady monster says that the new girl is sure a hard worker. Van asks her if she wants to share love with him, and she asks how he knows about it. And he replies that he can tell this by looking at the tattoo on her stomach. Suki says now that he found out it doesn't matter even with his skills, she figured since he is a healthy young, she could easily take care of him. Van says sorry, but she is too bad to make him fall in love with her, and she bows down and says he doesn't have to actually say it, she is well aware. Suki says no matter what she tries, she always fails, and she has been removed from so many dungeons, and this one was the only one to hire her. Therefore, in order to keep her place here, she has to use every trick she knows. She asks him to give her his absolute truth because if she doesn't reach her quota, she will be removed from the dungeon too. And now she is trying to persuade him by crying. The lady monster asks Okun how old is she, and he tells her that she is 27 and is older than her. If only the Lady Dragon Queen could be so assertive, he wouldn't want to see the Lady Dragon Queen reduced to that. And Mino-san cannot take it anymore. He gets super angry and says enough is enough, they do not need any more girls. He tries to hit Suki, but Van beats him up. And Mino-san says by defeating him, he has earned the right to pass. Therefore, he tells him to get going as the Lady Queen Dragon awaits. Van runs to meet Ryuka, and he tells Suki not to chase after her. Meanwhile, Suki says she had no idea he was that strong. She wouldn't have stood a chance. And she gets it that he is the Lady Queen's favorite person. The Lady Dragon Queen requested Suki that she be the one to deal with him because they cannot stand against him and they are not going to remove her just because she messed up. Mino-san says to him that she should take her time, do her best, and never go near Van again. Suki asks why would he be so kind to her because earlier he protected her with his own body and thinks that this bull has a thing for her. She looks at Mino-san and says that he is totally not her type, while Mino thinks if he doesn't get back, he will not be able to witness their precious love. And he says that Suki is so annoying. Ryuka sees the van and says he took too long. He sighs and she asks what is with the big sigh when they just met up. Van Koon says that he is just relieved and she doesn't get him whatever he is trying to say at all. Adventurers earn money by selling rare items such as gold, silver, and treasure. Moreover, they also sell on special requests such as monster horns and scales, which are all exchanged at the guild for money. The guy in a metal body asks Van if he is not heading for the dungeon, and the other one with him says, every here is headed for it, and most of the high-level requests have been taken. Van asks them if that is right, and he says that the new ones start on the beginner floors, scrounging up healing herbs for pennies, and asks Van if he wants to move up the ranks, he has to work for it. Van thinks that there aren't many requests that don't involve the dungeon, he guesses, so he tells Ryuka, which is why he was wondering if he could bring back some things from the dungeon. Ryuka says to him that adventurers need to go out of their way for her permission, and says that he can take anything or treasure he wants. They only have it to bring in the adventurers anyway, and in return, they take their equipment and take their powers, so it is a win-win. Van says, all right, then he needs some monster drops, and Ryuka asks which are they looking for, so he checks the list to tell her that they are looking for healing herbs, lizard man tails, slime, goblin claws, minotaurus horns, harpy feathers, orc fangs, and kobold hands. The monster says to give them a break, and Van says that he really started to feel bad for them because of beating them up every day, and Ryuka says they are fine, her powers heal them. Then she says, all joking aside, if he needs the treasures seriously, she would prefer they go to a floor no one has been to yet. She doesn't want to steal from Senpai. So, in that case, they decide to go together right now, and she will show him somewhere good. Both of them walk towards the floor, in the middle of which Van sees the area where he used to play with Ryuka, so he makes her remember that, and she says how nostalgic it is. Then Van says, it is a little late to bring this up, but wouldn't it be bad if someone saw them together like this, especially for the Dragon Queen? Ryuka replies that it should be fine, she is not worried about it. She says actually there is no one around to see them. Van says now that she mentioned it, usually there are monsters around when he comes through here. Where did they go? Ryuka replies. They are slacking off at work. A little while ago, Mino-san said to everyone that they were going to have to move to a higher floor for a bit as someone made a mess on the 27th floor the other day and they needed help with repairs. The lady monster tells them that they are leaving it to them, and the monsters say they will get rid of everything for her and will ensure her private rendezvous doesn't get interrupted while Mino-san is thinking, though they really wanted to eavesdrop on their conversation along the way. Meanwhile, Ryuka and Van reach floor number 70 where all the rooms are hidden, and Van shockingly asks if there was a place like this. He always just passed through, so he never noticed. Ryuka tells him this is where her dad left his treasure hoard. He was the one who built this dungeon after all, and Van says it is a mess. She really needs to tidy up because it is not his treasure, so it is not his problem. Then he asks her, how is her dad anyway? And she tells him he is good. Since he retired, he has been traveling the world with Mom, just having a blast. Then she tells him if he finds some treasure that he likes, then he can go ahead and take it, while all the monsters are peeping on them again. While they are looking for the treasure, a big slime kind of monster appears, and Van asks, what is that? It is a powerful monster, and no one knew that they appeared on this low of a floor. They are indiscriminate monsters born of the dungeon's power. Normally, they would only appear around the middle floors. Wool asks Mino-san what they should do as the monster will hurt Ryuka and Van. That and powerful monsters are the ones with the very structure of the dungeon, and the lower the floor, the worse they are. So many of them are on this floor, and if they are not careful, the entire dungeon could cave in. Mino-san says he knows, and their charge is to protect the Lady Queen, even if it costs them their lives. All of the monsters run toward the powerful monster to defeat it, and Mino-san tells everyone to pack it in. But until they can make their move, Van finishes the monster and asks Ryuka if it is all right to finish it, because they look pretty unfriendly. Ryuka says surely it was fine, she really doesn't know what they were either, and her dad told her that they were dangerous. Van says, all right, then he is going to keep finishing them while another monster sighs. Mina says, now that he really thinks about it, Van is stronger than the four of them. And Okun says that from now on, they will leave lower floor exterminations to him. Then the lady monster says watching him mess with her to protect the Lady Queen is precious, and Okun asks her if nothing shakes her. Meanwhile, the whole board comes there and Saki says, good work to everyone. Mino-san says she is that girl from before and asks why is she there, and she says that she was just heading to work when she heard a loud noise, so she came to check. Saki-san is still under the misunderstanding that Mino-san likes her. Then she asks what is going on there and tries to look, but Mino-san stops her from looking and tells her that she cannot look out there because the Lady Queen is using the 70th floor to strategize in complete secrecy. No matter how friendly they are, only the board can watch. Saki says, okay, but why? Does he have to embrace her like this? Amidst this, she thinks that this bull really does like her. And Lady Queen tells them that they are going over there. She says it seems like they are up to something fun, and she kind of wants to watch them now. Okun tells her that she has no integrity, while Van finishes the last of the monsters, and now they should find that treasure. He asks Ryuka if she is enjoying this more than him, and she laughs, saying she totally is. Then she takes him to the treasure ship, and he says that is a little too big. Ryuka falls on him and then says sorry to him while thinking that was a shock, and her heart is going to explode. She wonders if he noticed it too and wonders if Van's heart is also racing. Van sees the thing on which she tripped over and says the color characteristics show it is the legendary metal. He feels amazing after finding it, and she says it is a statue of her dad in an angry tone. Van picks it up and asks if he can have it, and she says sure he can, but inner her doesn't want to give it to him because it belongs to her dad. While Wool says that was just barely wholesome, and the Lady Monster says this is so frustrating, but Okun says they still saw something nice. While Mino-san says he wants to go and watch too, but he is stuck with Saki. The Adventurers Guild is in an uproar about what Van brought back, and everyone is shocked that he brought something insane. While walking in the market, a guy says hello to Van Kun while he's thinking that next time he needs to bring Ryuka a meat pie the next time he goes there. Amidst, he bumps into a girl and says sorry to her about that, and the girl says sorry to him and says it is her fault for not looking where she is going. She tells him this is her first time in this town and she gets a little carried away. Some guys call the girl and ask her to hurry up, and she tells them she is coming. The girl excuses Van and asks if he is an adventurer too and says they should help each other and decide to meet at the dungeon. The girl walks away, and the guy with her asks her if that guy is bothering her, but she tells him that no, he wasn't bothering. Instead, she carelessly bumped into him. The girl and the guy with her walk away while saying that the guy is strong. Meanwhile, Ryuka says that it is not like Van and her are like that, but still, she thinks he would have some reaction. Then she asks Harpy-san what she thinks about it, and Harpy replies that she is not sure what her queen is upset about. Then she says to her lady Dragon Queen, her lips look very cute in their own way, and Ryuka says that talking to her is pointless. Ryuka mentions she is talking about the other day when she tripped and fell on top of Van, and Harpy says it was very nervous scenery, because that was quite unfortunate. If she slipped a little more, she would have shared her love with him. Ryuka asks her to wait because she absolutely has no idea what Harpy is talking about, and she is well aware that they are peeping on them. Ryuka gets angry at them and says she will punish the 4 idiots later, and Wool gets a sudden chill. Then Harpy asks Ryuka if she is upset because Van seemed completely unfazed even after something so good happened between them, and Ryuka replies no, it is not that, and calls her an idiot bird. Then Ryuka gets up and says that it is not like she wanted him to feel something, but it is the kind of situation that should make anyone conscious. The fact that he showed no reaction is in and of itself upsetting, and she wanted him to have some sort of reaction. Harpy says Van is definitely a little too much of a blockhead for a boy, and she doesn't know why, doesn't like the Dragon Queen makes him feel for her. It is like he is a little too used to being around the Lady Dragon Queen, even if they are childhood friends, which is not a good thing. Ryuka asks her, what is she trying to say? And she says the problem is, how are they going to make Van's heart race? And then says, they might just need the Lady Dragon to show some skin. Harpy says Van should react to that, and she wants to see it too, 2 birds with 1 stone. Ryuka tells her angrily to stop while Harpy is thinking if she went too far. Then Ryuka asks her if she thinks her queen could do that because that would make it look like she has feelings for Van-kun. Ryuka gets upset and says to Harpy she should have asked for advice from her, while Harpy thinks that she is irrational but it is cute. Harpy thinks the Lady Dragon Queen is in a bad mood, and this has to be the start of a chance to get the event, an event that is guaranteed to happen in any situation. She is talking about an event in which the girl treats the boy with inconvenience. Then the sensitivity event where one accidentally drinks a magic potion and the feelings are awakened. And then the body swap event where one shares the love and has no choice left but to get married. According to Harpy's experience, there is a difference in their sense of distance, and it has made things awkward. However, this is where some interesting events can come and reduce the gap, and now is the time to give them full support. Harpy thinks of having a board meeting someday and thinks there will be this kind of even kind of event and laughs. Harpy thinks of Van finishing her and making chicken wings in her thoughts, and then she gets up and yells that the 45th floor has been taken. And Harpy yells, sorry, Van-kun. Then she says it is pretty early, and it is not even noon yet. Meanwhile, the other monster interrupts, and Okun tells Harpy-san to get ready as an enemy is here. Okun tells them that an adventurer has broken the record of making it to the 45th floor, and it is someone new. On the other side, it is the same girl who bumped into Van-kun, and she finishes the guardian of the 45th floor and says, that is why A-class adventurers couldn't make it here. She says it seems like they are the first ones, and the guy with her says that he is coming for the Black Dragon Queen. The legendary man Gold is in town, says Van-kun. A guy asks Van-kun if he never heard of him, and he replies that he was raised in the country and that kind of news was rare. The guy tells him that he is a famous adventurer who has left behind countless legends. That is why they call him that. He conquered dungeons all over the world and marched all by himself into a fort with 1,000 bandits. There is also the legend of him defeating the demon of the vessel, and even the strongest monsters cannot match his strength, and they say his skills are too high. He tells him to look at all the A-class adventurers who are down in the dumps now, and just today, Gold went into the dungeon nearby, and he might have even defeated the dungeon's ruler for all they know. Meanwhile, Harper tells Okun that they are done evacuating non-combat monsters, and Okun says now they can do is wait for those adventurers to show up. Then Wool asks how is Inferno-kun, and Mino-san tells him he will be fine, he has been admitted and is undergoing treatment, and his life isn't in danger anymore. OK-kun says he has some digging on those two adventurers. One of them is the great swordsman Golde, and the other is his follower known as Sylvia. Her role is to support him with buffs and healing. Mino-san has also heard rumors about this legendary man, and Okun says that supposedly they have conquered countless dungeons, but they never take any treasures. Wool then says, in other words, their aim isn't treasure, but the Lady Dragon Queen, which is a big trouble for them. One of the monsters asks how long will it take for him to get here, and Mino-san tells him that he defeated an inferno in one hit, so he doubts it will be long. Meanwhile, the Lady Dragon Queen also shows up and the monsters tell her to stand below, but she refuses to do that because they will be the first people to make it to the bottom floor other than Van, so she wants to see. Okun asks her why is she excited about that, because they are here for her and she is in danger. Ryuka says it is fine if they lose, she will mess with, and today she will watch over them instead. And Mino-san asks her to go and hide inside. In contrast, Gold and the girl are walking down the dungeon and Mino-san and other companions finally come face to face with them. Mino-san asks if he is the legendary Gold and Gold replies yes, he is the only legendary man. Okun thinks that he is the type to say it himself, and then Gold says, they have come here to finish Black Dragon Queen, so let them pass. The monster says they will not allow it and they will be his opponents. Wool says he will be the first to go. They can call him a legend or whatever, but those kinds of things are always overstated. Amidst, Harpy asks Wool if he knows. She has always wondered how he does that. Wool-kun begins to run towards Gold, but Gold is too powerful, and he hits him directly on the floor in one hit. Then Gold says, people often say that he is bluffing, but the legends are true. Then Gold tries to beat Harpy, but she flies away. The monster asks Wool if he is alright, and he replies, tells them to shut up. Meanwhile, Gold thinks all he got was a bump from that splash, which is some defense, as expected of the soldiers on the lower floors. Mino-san says to Harpy to protect the Lady Queen with Okun, and Gold tells Sylvia that he will not need support so she can fall back. Goldie and the monster come face to face, while Mino-san thinks this man is incredible because he did 50 winnings in an instant. To think that there was someone else who could hold a candle to Van-kun, Goldie says they are stronger than any dungeon boss he has ever fought, and he is getting excited to mess with the Black Dragon Queen as he lives to mess with the strong. It is because only messing with the strong can make him happy, but he has become too strong, and it has been many years since he has found a worthy opponent, and this dungeon was his last hope. Gold says he will be taking the move as he knows their strength now and he will not be defeated by the wall. Mino is thinking. He never thought that anyone but Van-kun can make him go all out. Golde takes out his sword and defeats Mino-san in one go, and Mino shouts they will protect the place they belong to. The ceiling is crumbling and Golde tells Sylvia to watch out and dodge it. Amidst, Van-kun enters and he saves her while everyone is left in shock. Van asks Sylvia if she is alright and she says he is the guy from before. Van says they really did meet in the dungeon and she thanks him for saving her. Mino asks Van what is he doing and questions him if he knows her. Mino realizes he misread the situation. Their true enemy is over there, the girl with a lovely face. Then Mino shouts at Van to get away from her and quit the Princess Carrie, and tells him that the Lady Dragon Queen is waiting, while the Queen also enters. The Black Dragon Queen comes out with her dragon, and Golde wonders what is that, and he says not to tell her that she is Ryuka, the Black Dragon Queen. Van is thinking why is Ryuka so mad, but he doesn't know that she is mad because he is holding Sylvia in his hands. Van thinks Mino-san, and they are occupied, and there is the adventurer, and he puts Sylvia back on the ground gently. Mino-san thinks about how is Van-kun gonna deal with that, and then Van asks Ryuka why is she mad. She says it is nothing. Van tries to talk to her, but she tells him to leave her alone and stop talking to her, while the monsters are thinking that they are using hand signs that only childhood friends would understand. Then Van takes out the meat pie and says that they should eat this together, but Ryuka angrily says that she doesn't want any. Harpy thinks she is so dishonest, and Okan asks if that is really the issue right now. Van is thinking about how can Ryuka turn down the meat pie and thinks like his senpai were saying this strong guy was really him. Then Gold asks for permission to allow him to express his gratitude for saving her and says he is Gold. Then Gold says to Van that he must be very strong to make it up till here, but up ahead is even more dangerous, so he should fall back. Golde says the battle will get more dangerous and asks Van to protect Sylvia while he is battling with them. Van is thinking about what he should do. Sylvia says to Van that he should go to Ryuka and they will be fine, and Golde says they should engage back once more to what they were doing. Van says sorry to Sylvia and says that he has kept her waiting, so he is going to go ahead, and Golde asks if he can deal with them himself. He tells him to give it up because each one of them is a dungeon boss or higher, and he is the only one who can defeat them. Gold says he will take Ryuka and he will not allow anyone to get in his way. Goldie doesn't know what is happening and he gets frozen. He cannot believe it is overwhelming him. The monster says since he is frozen now, while he cannot move, they will back him up. The monster tries to beat Goldie, but Van stops them, so Mino asks why did he that? Van replies that either way he is going to defeat them if he wants to pass. And Okun says he has a point. Then Van Kun turns and says to Golda that, sorry, but he will be facing him instead. And Golda asks, why would he do that? Ven says it is because Ryuka is his childhood friend, while the monsters are thinking that Van Kun just straight up said it. Legendary Man uses his full power against Van, but he defeats his power in one go. Mino-san couldn't believe that Van Kun stopped it, and Okun couldn't even see Van Kun's arms move. Golde takes another move, but Van defeats him again by just using his fingers. Mino-san and others are in shock. How can this happen? Then Van punches Golde, due to which he falls to the ground. Golde says it is so overwhelming that he can't move his arms or legs and asks Van just how and why is he so strong. The monster says, Van Kun has been coming here every 10 months for 10 years now, ever since the Lady Dragon became the ruler of this dungeon. Each time he has to mess with the monsters on all 100 floors, and the monsters say that they raised him. Then Gold says who cares about any of that because he has sought strength by diving into countless battles, so he knows what kind of hell they have been through, and it is not a sane way to live. Gold asks to have that insane strength at his age. Why did he train himself that hard? Gold interrogates why he has to be so strong, and Van says that is obvious, to see Ryuka. After hearing this, everyone is in shock, and Van looks at Ryuka and thinks for some reason she has been back to normal. Therefore, it is his chance now, and he pushes a meat pie into Ryuka's mouth, and she eats it peacefully. Ryuka gets happy, and she asks for another one, so Van gives it one more, while all the monsters there find it very cute. Amidst, Golda doesn't know what is going on, and he asks them about it in a state of shock. Van Kun enters the dungeon and runs to meet Ryuka while the monsters out there are wondering if he left something out there. Van Kun goes in there to meet Ryuka and tells her that he brought volume 1 of Dungeon no Osananajimi. He tells her that they might read this together with her, and she tells him that he cannot read it because she is the main character. While the monsters say reading this in volume format shows the Lady Dragon Queen's cuteness in a different way, Goldie is overwhelmed by a mere boy while the Black Dragon Queen is eating a pie and the monsters that were on par with him are still smiling. Goldie cannot understand what on earth is going on while Ryuka asks Van if that adventurer is going to be all right, and he says, he might have gone too hard on him, but he did say something bad though. Sylvia assures that Golda-san will be fine and asks them to leave it to her. Okun thinks that she hasn't used a single buff or heal up until now, and she is going to heal him, which means the real show is about to begin. Sylvia keeps Golda's head on her lap, presses it and says it is the first time in a time that he has lost, but he looks like he was having so much fun. Goldie tells her to leave it in front of the enemy, and she says, it is all right, those guys aren't too dangerous, and Okun says that they are the dangerous ones. The monster says even if he is the legendary man, he thinks they will get away with making a little girl there, and they call the guards. Sylvia says she appreciates the concern, but it is fine because they are married, and she does this because she loves him. The monster thinks just how bad is this guy, and the gap between them is too much, but Sylvia tells them that they are of the same age and both of them are 35 years old. The monster says they are so young, and Gold replies that they get that every time. Sylvia then tells them that they even have a 16-year-old daughter, while everyone is shocked that they have a kid too. Sylvia says that Gold has been adventuring ever since he was a kid, so she started tagging along because she was worried about him. Van realizes that he did something super rude, and then Sylvia says that earlier, getting carried by that young man brought the memories of the past, and right now he is the one who is having the most fun. Sylvia tells them that they are childhood friends for 30 years now, and the monsters are in shock after seeing a married couple of childhood friends. In that instant, the four idiots found their utopia. Mino-san couldn't get enough of it, and Okan said so. That is where paradise lies. While Horpy-san hopes that they have at least 4 more, and Wool wants to be part of their family, Ryuka thinks if they are really childhood friends and married, and then Mino-san says to Golde that he wins. Golde asks why is, so Mino-san replies that they have been childhood friends for 30 years, they are married, and on top of that they have a kid, so they are too far ahead of them. Mino says they cannot get enough childhood friends, and they don't have a right to take that from them, but Golde cannot get what he means. Sylvia is happy that Golde-san won, and Goldie says as if he could accept that. Then Goldie tells Sylvia that they are leaving and they will come back, but Sylvia asks him to wait and goes near the Dragon Queen. She whispers in Ryuka's ears that she will be rooting for them and says, "Sorry about what happened before." Ryuka asks her what is she talking about, and Sylvia says that it is obvious, that face she had before. Goldie-san gets the same way when he is jealous. Goldie tells Sylvia that they are going, and the 4 idiots say to Goldie to tell them some stories when they come here next time, but Goldie says next time they are all going down when he comes again. After he leaves, Van says, "What a day it was." And then Ryuka says thanks to Van for protecting her, and he says he wanted to eat those pies before they got cold. Ryuka says those were tasty, but what were those, he says. Thanks to her for going on that treasure hunt the other day, he got quite a money from it. The 4 idiots thank God because the Lady Queen has calmed down, and Okak thinks that Van-kun was the cause of it in the first place, and he bought those pies with money he got from her treasure. Van says although Goldie and Sylvia are dangerous, it looks like they can get along with them, while Ryuka thinks she really lost cool there and she wonders if Van even cares. Van says he wonders if they will be like that too when they grow up, and Mino-san gets shocked at how far Van is planning to go today. Ryuka asks Van what he means by that, and he hopes that they will always be able to play around as childhood friends. Ryuka gets super angry at him and thinks he is the same as always, but she lets him off the hook today because she remembers how he said he comes here to meet Ryuka every day. Mino-san questions if this counts as progress, but no one knows the answer, and OK-kun says he wonders. Meanwhile, Golde and Sylvia withdraw after reaching the 50th floor, and they decide to come back here once they have carefully prepared for the bottom floor, and they will be staying in this town for a while. Meanwhile, the people waiting out there are surprised that Gold made it to the 50th floor, and they call him a legendary man. He couldn't make it all the way to the bottom. This dungeon's reputation is going to skyrocket. Gold sees Van-kun up there, and he approaches him to say that he considers his debt to be repaid, as he just declared he will be back soon. Van's senpais ask Van when he met the legendary, and he replies that they got pretty friendly in the dungeon, while the senpai says that the newbie is a little too fearless. Then Sylvia says to Van that they should keep getting along, and Van asks them why don't they get something to eat and call it a welcome party, while the senpai says to Van to leave that to his senpai here, and they tell Goldie and Sylvia to get whatever they want. Gold-san orders one of the largest strawberry parfaits with 2 spoons, while Van thinks that he is the type who likes that kind of thing. In a certain dungeon, Goldie is polishing his powers and says he has to get stronger and he must clear his mind. On the other side, Ryuka asks Van what kind of training he does, and he asks why is she interrogating him about it, so she says she was just wondering. But she thinks about Mino-san, and he asks her to interrogate Van-kun about how he trains himself, as it is a little above his station. Mino-san is wondering what would have happened if Van-kun didn't show up the other day, and he thinks he cannot just sit back and watch over them. He thinks if he can use Van-kun's routine as a reference, he might be able to get stronger. Minu-san keeps saying in his mind that he wants to know about his routine, and Van-kun says that just coming here is his training. However, he also takes practice swings on top of a mountain, near his hometown, and he tells Ryuka that Golda-san spends time in the mountains too. That is how they met, actually. Van tells her that Golda-san also trains himself in the mountains, and mountains are a great spot for training. Ryuka says she stays indoors, so she cannot go there. The place where Van-kun trains himself is known as the Byakuya mountain range, and it is one of the biggest sacred mountains on the eastern continent. Van tells Ryuka that he used to meditate a lot and tells her it is a practice for refining the flow of power through the body, and it is pretty hard to actually clear the mind. She asks, how is it different from normal, while Mino-san clears his mind and thinks everyone said they would train in their own ways and he cannot fall behind. He tries to clear his mind, while on the other side, Saki is crying, and she says today was a failure too, when the Senpyos told her that they know she is a girl who works in the dungeon and tries to love everyone. Senpyos asks her who on earth would do such things in such a dangerous dungeon, while she thinking, at this rate, it will be the same as last time. That girl still hasn't managed to steal any life energy, and she thinks she better start looking for another job. Amidst, she finds Mino-san meditating in the middle of the mountains and wonders, what is he doing? Mino-san keeps saying together forever love, and he ends up thinking about Lady Dragon Queen and Van-kun. He tries to calm down and empty his mind and says, just get married already, and sees Saki-san over there. When she shouts, what did he just say? He tells her that he was just meditating as training, but he had too many thoughts and ended up unconsciously muttering them out. Saki thinks he is trying to throw her off, and she is still mistakenly thinking that Mino-san likes her. Mino-san thinks he needs to find his zone quickly, and that Bull hates Saki. She tells him that he is incredible, the entire board is very strong, and yet he all seek even greater strength. Mino-san thinks he shouldn't aim for a clear mind and should let his spirit soar with delusions while watching the Lady Dragon Queen and Van's precious time together. Mino-san gets the answer and says this is it, while Saki thinks it couldn't hurt for her to try a little harder and says thanks to him. Mino-san asks her if she would prefer to go to the beach or she will prefer the mountains, and that day Mino-san just spouted delusions from his mouth. A few days later, Mino-san feels he is brimming with infinite power and his mind will no longer stay from the thought of loving childhood friends. Okan says to Mino, judging by his appearance, he has made it to the next level, and Okan focused on muscle training, Parpi focused on her top speed, and Wulkun obtained the power of Fenrir. It is great that everyone is stronger than before, and now they will suffer no defeat at the hands of the ones who entered the dungeon. Ryuka and Van are stuck somewhere, and it is the room from where they cannot leave without doing. Van has no clue how they ended up here. 1 hour ago, Ryuka asked Van if he wanted to eat some snacks, and she said Kyoji-san made some delicious pudding today. She takes him near the treasure in which the snacks are present, and Van asks her, what is this, and sees snacks in a treasure. Ryuka says, this is a bit much, isn't it? And he says, it seems kinda suspicious. Ryuka tells him it is fine and they should open it already, and he asks her to wait, but a light comes from inside which takes her in the treasure. The treasure also takes Van inside it, and both of them are stuck inside it now. She asks Van if he cannot just break the walls, and he says he probably can, but in this cramped area it would end up hurting her as well. Ryuka says it is the same for her too, and she couldn't believe there was a trap here of all things, and this is truly unthinkable. Meanwhile, Mino-san says that the plan went well, and this is a trap set by Orkkun in his territory, but they will probably figure it out. Okun says after this, they will figure it out, and they will be mad at them for sure, and they avoid thinking about it for now. Harpy says, the trap is amazing, thinking about how it could ensnare even those two. Okune says it is a treasure after all. One will think it is some kind of treasure, but when they open it, there is a closed-off space that traps them. Unless the one gets past the designated condition, they cannot leave. Okune wanted a monitor to be able to see what was going inside, but all they could do from there was to listen to their voices, and they had to run away when this was over. Harpy brings in the tea for them and says this is all they need, now they should all enjoy Van-kun and Ryuka's adventure, while Wool yells at them to stop it and not to share the love. Harpy yells at him to shut it, as he is one of them too, and he tells them if they put a young boy and a girl in a cramped room like that alone, and on top of that there is text on the wall that they cannot get up if they don't have it, so that isn't a good wholesome at all. Harpy yells at him to keep talking and she will do some bad things to him first. Wool tells Mino that he has misjudged this woman, and Mino says this is a road they must cross sooner or later in the end. As long as they are happy, he has no complaints. Wool says this is true as well, and this guy is too easy. Meanwhile, Ryuka guesses it cannot be helped and they should do as the wolves tell them to do. They just need to share love. That's all. Imuna-san says at last the show can begin to prepare itself today. Ryuka asks what exactly is sharing the love, as there are 3 words and those are bad marks, she thinks, to write the ideas about the word as she has no idea what it is anyway. She asks Van if he wants to play rock, paper, scissors for the first guess. Harpy-san thought they would understand the meaning of the 3 dots, and she says to everyone, when did they become such degenerates, she wonders. But everyone tells her not to group them in with her. Van thinks that they are still off by 1 letter or something, and Ryuka thinks those idiots want them to do something weird in there. Ryuka remembers that they were trapped once before like this too. It was when they were journeying to get him back home, and there was a storm, so they hid behind a tree. They couldn't leave that tree all day, back then was bad as well. And Van says he remembers how much the thunder scared her. Ryuka says as he can talk, she seems to remember him crying as loud as her, and they find it cute. But the main thing that they remember from that story was when the 2 of them left once the storm ended, they got to see the beautiful starry sky, and it was the first time it looked so stunning. Since she became the dungeon master here, she hasn't really left, as the dungeon needs her power to operate after all. Van asks her if she isn't just a shut, and she replies that is true too. Van says they can still see the starry sky in a lot of places. Like that, just like her dad gave her control of the dungeon, if they find someone to do the same for her, she will be free again. Then someday when she can head outside again, they will go to look at the stars again. And Ryuka says of course they will. Mino-san and other idiots are listening to their conversation while standing outside the treasure, and they find it super cute. OK-kun asks if they want to build a wedding hall for them while they are still stuck in there, and Harpy cannot believe they got such a result from her bad plan, and Wool needs another coffee with no sugar in it. Harpy angrily says there are still some chances for good parts, and then the door of the treasure opens and they get out of it. Harpy asks why the chest opened, even though they didn't do anything yet, and Oku is getting why it opened. The box has mistaken the conversation with a pillow talk while everyone is still in a state of shock, and they don't know what is happening. Mino-san angrily says it appears that they failed, and Okun supposes that he must debug this now. Harpy-san says in the end they managed to create a good atmosphere for them and they all had fun too. Mino-san also agrees with her and says in the end it all worked, and Ryuka-san puts them all in the treasure as a punishment. They keep saying sorry to her and all of them mess with in there because they are touching each other's body parts unintentionally. Okun says he will say again that the reason they set up their plan of doing something to Ryuka was to get her to cry, and Van consoles her that way they would get to see some stuff. Wool says making a girl just cry like that is wrong, and they literally work for Ryuka. Okun says to him that he doesn't understand the true emotions, and Mino-san says to him, that is not emotions, that is just his ego. Just like every day, the monsters are in the middle of their meeting, and every single one of them persuades each other to go with the situation they had. And then Harpy enters and says that they are abnormal. Everyone gets quiet and things get awkward in there, and then Harpy-san asks them about handcuffs, magic, and love potions, and all of them tell her that they didn't ask her anything at all. Gusan has been a maid and a employee of Ryuka-san since her childhood days. She can do cooking, cleaning, and laundry perfectly. She is a very talented maid with a keen power of observation. She has this ability. Plus her love for Ryuka turns her into a schemer that perhaps surpasses the other monsters. Okun tells her that they never said that and they never did, and Mino-san asks her why is she giving an explanation, as if there is some kind of camera. Harpy says, as expected from Gukun, she isn't lacking any emotions. Okun says to all of them to see, there is an expert between them and Gusan is their ultimate creation. This comes in quite handy for Orkun, whose subordinates created her. Gusan takes the lead and says that Orkun-sama is her master and her forever father, and he is the parent of her parent. In other words, he is her grandfather. And Okun says he is still 26. Just like that, she will say some things that will hurt, and Okun just hopes she doesn't do this with Ryuka-san. Gusan tells them not to worry about that even a little bit, and Okun angrily asks her to whom is she saying this. and she says that she has analyzed Ryuka-san and Van's relationship perfectly. She mentions if they will end up together, she will be the happiest indeed, but there's just one thing that concerns her, that she has to wonder if they are really necessary, who claim to watch over her. The four idiots yell at her to stop saying hurtful things, and she tells them that it is said quite often that, aren't these four idiots showing up too often, and so on. Okun yells at her to stop being like this as they have got their own share of troubles here. Then Minosan says to her that they are the ones entrusted with the protection of Ryuko-san, and they are her bodyguards. Therefore, they must watch over her in ways she cannot even imagine. Gusan then asks if Harpy-san was watching them while hiding in the washroom, a thing for them to watch over, and Minosan gets super angry at her, but Okun tells him to calm down. Wool says Van-kun will be coming soon, and Gu says that she will take her leave. She must make snacks, and tells him to leave as well. She tells him to do their usual things, where they break down some wall or the other, and watch over them. Okun says she is not wrong though. On the other side, Van and Ryuka are playing chess, and Van tells her that it is his specialty. He looks at the clock in the middle of it and says it is getting late. And Ryuka says they have to end it as they played 20 games after all. Van says that was perfectly fun, but he is really hungry now, so he has to go home quickly. Ryuka asks him if he wants to eat dinner with her today, and he agrees to eat it at her place. While sitting at the dinner table, Van asks her if she is a princess, and she tells him to address her as Hime-sama from now on. Meanwhile, Gusan brings in the food and tells him to just keep eating, while Van is wondering what is wrong with her expression. He eats dinner at her place and then says thanks to Ryuka for the food. Then he tells her that he got many chances to meet Gold and his wife, but Sylvia-san's love stories about them are a little crazy. They start to love each other in public when they drink more than their capacity, and it is really hard to stop them when that happens. Ryuka asks Van if he is his mom or something because he looks out for them too often. Then Van asks Ryuka if she is always eating alone, and she replies she has gotten used to it now and tells him talking to him while eating is pretty nice too. Amidst the four idiots are watching them again, and they are happy that Van and Ryuka are eating together, and they say it is like they are a newly wedded couple. Ryuka asks Van to eat some more meat, and he tells her to get some vegetables while Gusan is watching them. Gu asks Van to lick off the sauce that is stuck on Ryuka's face, but Ryuka gets super angry and she yells at her maid. Ryuka starts to cough, and Gu says it is her judgment that this action will make Ryuka happy. After hearing this, Ryuka asks her why would she be happy after this happens, and Gu says that is because she loves Van-kun. Meanwhile, the four idiots are thinking about what is this maid trying to do, and Ryuka yells at her maid that she doesn't have this kind of relationship with Van at all. He is just a childhood friend, that is all. Gu says that is such a typical line, and Ryuka asks the four idiots if this is their other plan they cooked up. Minosan tells her that it isn't their plan and she is misunderstanding it while they panic. Ryuka calls them all near her and tells them to eat dinner together while she takes their class. The four idiots come running to eat the meal and say that they love her. While sitting at the dinner table, Ryuka asks Gusan if she would like to join them too, and she says she would love to join them, but she is a maid, and as such, she cannot consume food. Furthermore, she has no need for food or water anyway. However, she is happy seeing them all smiling while eating together, and she is quite satisfied with that indeed. Gu says she is quite happy, and her hunger has been sated with stuff or something like that. And Ryuka asks her, what is she mumbling about over there? Gu asks Van if from today onwards she should start making dinner for him as well, and Ryuka says to her it is a little early for something like that, but it is not like she is opposed to it or anything. Amidst, Van replies that it would be too much to ask her all, so he cannot. He says he can go into town, buy bento, and bring it here to eat. The four idiots are wondering if they will be beaten up by him twice a day now. In the end, they compromised and decided to eat dinner together twice a week. In a certain dungeon, the host welcomes everyone to the festival and announces that they will begin with the matchmaking party. Everyone claps, and Harpy goes there wearing a wig and fake glasses to change her looks. It is hard to meet people in this dungeon because of its structure. This event is set up to help these monsters, and One can call it a single meetup, says Gusan. The monsters get along with each other, and the black dragon shows up and tells them to keep it in moderation as she knows they all met someone wonderful today. The host declares that was a word from their lady dragon, while Ryuka thinks she is not good with these sorts of parties and is going to head back and read her book. Harpy decides to go to the party because none of them have a good experience with romance, which is why their plans keep failing. She says if they can get some experience here, they might find a good way to get Van and Ryuka closer. Okun tells her to hold on and says Mino-san is going to be no more because he cannot take it as it is winter. Harpy asks what happened to him and Okun, and will say they will pass good luck. Harpy says they are so useless, and she goes away while telling them to introduce themselves to the other people at their table. She is going to learn all about romance techniques and look around where couples are forming here and there. Wool is worried about Harpy, so he comes to check on her. He wonders if she is going to be all right and sees Harpy is not good at all. She went near some monster but didn't know why it wasn't going well. She goes near the monster while introducing herself as Pico, and she tells them that there are a lot of her underlings here and participating for real would be good, and the monsters ask her if she is Harpy. She thinks there is one of them right away, and she tells him that yes, she is Harpy. And the other monster tells her that his boss is a harpy too, but he is completely different from her. He says she seems more mature than his noisy boss, and Harpy says he is talking behind their back and tells him it is very bad though. The monster says she is right and apologizes to her while she thinks she scared him. Harpy thinks she needs to think of something to start talking about, and then thinks of something they would have in common. She tells him that Van Koon adventure guy beat her up again today, and the monster says not to mention him. Each and every day they have to deal with that off-putting who even knows what he is thinking. Harpy thinks everyone is scared of Van Koon. There were a series of similar failures after that. Gusan tells this all to Wool, and he asks her why is she here, and she tells him that she is here to help the scene to set and leaves. Wool guesses he should head back, but then sees Harpy-san going somewhere. Harpy looks for a relaxing position, and Wool thinks she started watching over them and abandoned her own love to fall back into habit. Harpy is watching over a couple and sees them holding hands already. She keeps looking around, but then some monster approaches her and says they should check out the party together. She tells the monster that he is bothering her, and then the host interferes and tells them that they are bothering the other participants. Then the monster says to the ladies, the three things that the ideal monster man needs are powerful magic, income, and some backbone, and laughs out loud. He says the boss of the 40th floor for each Sama is the one who has it all, and says he might be the next dungeon master. He tells the ladies that this is their chance to marry into luxury and laughs evilly. Then a monster girl interrupts and says what an interesting conversation and asks him to let her in on this. She is the most powerful leader under Lady Dragon Sam's direct control, known as Harpy-san, and her age is 27 years old. It is the time same as the irrational fear that comes every day dominated by the strong. Harpy yells at them and the monsters run away from there. While saying sorry, she says that guidance on the 40th floor needs some guidance. The monster girl, who is scared of them, says thanks to Harpy-san for protecting her. Everyone says that is the strongest of the leaders, and they are overwhelmed by her. This was Harpy's 15 minutes of fame, and Wool is happy that she is doing great, while Harpy thinks there is one thing that she has learned when it comes to love, or anything else. One has to be themselves. When it comes to that, those who will be just fine are Ryuka and Van. Harpy decides to liven up the place according to her way and tells everyone to refresh everything and start partying again. Thus, she drank a lot of drinks and she made a mess of the hall. Okun says damages are coming out of her pocket, and Harpy is glad that her salary is high. A new monster has appeared in the dungeon, and no one has ever seen that thing ever before. They are not sure what kind of monster it is. Orkun asks Ryuka and Van what they should do, so she asks him what is wrong. Wool tells her that there aren't any monsters scheduled for work in the beginner area, and he messed up while arranging the shifts. He says the only one there is the Goblin Gobsan, and Mino-san asks if it isn't dangerous. Wool says actually Goblin said that he would deal out justice to the ones that enter the dungeon and handle them himself. Okin takes the lead and says no matter how he looks at that, that is tough. and asks if there are any other monsters free, but it seems like everyone is busy. Harpy asks why doesn't he go, and Wool says that truthfully, they are boss-level monsters after all, they cannot reveal their identities that early. Ryuka angrily says she doesn't care what he does, just stop having his little meeting over there while the four idiots apologize. The next day, Goblin says he told Orcscan that he could handle this so confidently, but now that it is the actual day off, he is a bit worried. Goblin-san is the leader of the lower level monster, and he is all alone today. He stands up and says there is no other way out, so he might as well give it his all, while a monster approaches him and he doesn't know what the hell he is. The monster says he was told by Orcscan to come here and says he is a rookie monster and he will be in his care today. The day before, Ryuka asks Van if he has some work tomorrow as he bought a helmet from a shop. He says if he can pay back the debt he keeps accumulating somehow, plus, with this outfit on, they cannot see his face or anything, so it should be fine. Okin says if it is under his recommendation, his name is Van, but Van rejects it and says his name will be Pan, who is a half-man and a half-goat monster. While Pan is with Goblin, they decide what they should throw at the adventurers first, and Pan tells him to leave it to him. Pan brings out his sword and the adventurers run away, and he asks Goblin what is wrong with him. Goblin angrily tells him that those were A-class adventurers. He has to let them make it to the 30th floor at least. Pan asks Goblin if it is okay not to defeat them here, and Goblin says that for C-level adventurers and below, they have to beat them. If those guys get any further, they will sustain injuries also. The way he beats them is over the top. He is supposed to make them admit defeat, not overwhelm them. That way they can take their powers. Pan thinks this guy is so dedicated, and Goblin says to him, if he is this incompetent, it is better without him here. And Pan apologizes for his mistakes. Goblin asks him to watch the way he operates and moves. Next up is a B-level duo, so he has to stop them, but only at level 29, while Pan thinks they are his senpeios. His senpeios enter, and Goblin tries to scare them. Van thinks his senpeios are hiding their intelligence so well, while the senpei beats Goblin badly. Goblin falls on the floor and says this is how he does it, and tells the rookie that he is up next. Pan goes in front of the senpais, but gets beaten up by them, so the senpais think they are in good form today, so they should keep it just like this. Then Goblin says to Pan that he is not so bad at this, and Pan asks if he remembers all the adventurers' faces and levels, and Goblin replies, of course he does. They come here often. After Owl, it is his duty to remember at least that much, and tells Rookie to make sure he remembers as well. Van thinks this person is pretty used to mess withing, and Goblin tells him there are a few people he has to watch out for. The legendary man, the weird guy with dead eyes, and Van. Goblin is sure that Pan knows those guys are tough. Goblin tells him they mess with everyone so that they don't mess up, so they mess with at their opponent's level, which makes it a good mess with for everyone, and this is the way of a low-level monster. Pan understands everything, and Goblin tells him that there is another challenger right here, so they have to repair that wall and then reset that trap that is no more. Pan puts the treasure back in the location where it was and carries out an adventurer outside of the dungeon safely. He collects the herbs they have been growing and has to hurry up because some other adventurers are coming. Van thinks a monster's life is a lot tougher than an adventurer's life, and the lower levels are the busiest levels for any monster. Even the strong Van Con is slightly coming to understand this. However, this is Van Conqueror of the Dungeon with his quick mind and learning abilities. He learned the work quickly. Goblin tells Pan that the next adventurer is here, and Pan says from the right approaches a B-level swordsman as well as a C-level rogue. There is also an A-B-level magician and a C-level healer. He has to engage them for 5 minutes and let them move on. After working for a bit, they finally get a break at last, and Goblin asks Pan if he will not take his armor off, and he says he is a little shy. Goblin says to him that he is a fast learner. He has worked here 10 years and has never seen an enterprising rookie like him, and Pan says thanks to him for the appreciation. Van thinks that Goblin has been messing with the same adventurers as people like Mino-san, and he is an amazing person. Goblin asks Pan if he wants to work in this position permanently, and Pan says he is not so sure. Meanwhile, Goblin enters and says he has heard that there is a never-before-seen monster on the floor. And Goblin panics and says that it is the legendary man and orders Pan to be ready. The legendary man beats them up and says they were pretty weak, he supposes. And Golde asks if they have been masking their true powers, while Van thinks he has been found out too quickly. Golde asks them to show him their true power and calls them a weeko, and Goblin asks what is he saying. He thinks it is about making them feel satisfied in their victory. And Pan gets up and says in that case he has to mess with. Goblin thinks Pan seems a bit weaker than Mino-san, while Van thinks he is just going to satisfy Golda-san so that he can leave. Pan gets defeated by a powerful strike used by Golde and falls to the ground. Golde says to Sylvia that they should go back, and she asks what is wrong. Golde says he cannot find any worthy adversaries today and he doesn't want to mess with them if he is not giving his all. Sylvia says she wanted to chat with Ryuka and Harpy, and Golde says that is not what they were here for. Pan thinks they went home, and he wonders if they were happy with that. Well, Goblin tells Pan that he overdid it, and Pan says this much is totally fine, so there is no need to worry. Then Goblin says thanks to Pan for saving him today, but he guesses if he is that strong, the first floor is a bit low for him. Pan puts his sword back in and says that he will never forget the things he taught him today, and no matter where he goes or where he stands, he will work his hardest so he doesn't lose to him. Goblin appreciates his spirit and tells him that he can talk to him whenever he wants any advice. The next day, Wool says sorry to Goblin for managing the floor all by himself as he gave him too much work, and Goblin says he is a bad dude to send that kind down his way as the kid is destined for big things, while Wool is not sure what is Goblin talking about. Van tells Ryuka that he kind of wants to become a monster, and she asks why is that and what is he talking about. In the news after this, Pan-kun became known as a rare monster among the members of the guild. After messing together with the Goblin, Van-kun is making an effort not to harm any monster. Mino-san also thinks Van has changed a bit recently, but he still breaks through everyone like always. But he is not really scary anymore. He doesn't really break the dungeon's room anymore either, and his concerns are truly touching. Okun says at this rate he is going to think they are hardly even going to be needed anymore in terms of slowing him down. While they are talking, Van enters and says he is here, while the monster says to speak of the devil, it is Van-kun. Harpy asks Van what is up. He really doesn't usually alter them, and Van says he is just feeling a little tired today and asks if there is any way they can let him through without causing any mess. Mino thinks that kind of rare thing is that Van-kun is tired, and Wolf says, sure, he can pass, and it is better if they do not create any mess every time. They can just talk instead. Wool says it takes a while to get here after all, plus even if they create a mess, they're just going to lose anyway, and that tires them out. Then Harpy says they can give him a pass straight to the top floor, and Okun says, in a funny way, maybe they can just make a special path for Van-kun to get up there. Mino-san asks them to hold it right there because even if it is Van, he cannot allow that, his companions say. He should stop those who make it to the last floor at all costs, and those are the words entrusted to them by their previous queen. Mino says it is their destiny and swings his sword to beat Van-kun. He splits him into halves while the monsters are in shock, and they ask Mino what he just did. Van says it is fine and says it appears there is way too gray through Ryuka's guardians, another condition to meet something that isn't simply the power to create a mess and get through. The lady shows up and says to them, their job is to protect Ryuka from the strangers, while the monsters panic and ask if she has returned already. The lady asks if they all remember why she left them here to begin with. Through one way or another, she gathered them all. They were all young, but in possession of the power necessary to stand alone by herself. The four idiots say this is why they are tired right now and ask if they can have a break now. Lady gets angry at them, so they apologize to her. The lady says later she shall train the four of them this time, and Mino asks if she is talking about him as well, and she says if that shouldn't be obvious, the four of them are supposed to be her elite team after all. Okakun tells Mino to come along as they will be no more together. Meanwhile, Van enters and sees Auntie Rin there, so he is shocked, and Ryuka also comes to see her mother. Ryuka's mother asks her if she is in good health, and she tells her that she is all good. Her mother says it has been a while, so why didn't she have a nice chat with her? Both of them go inside a room to have a chat, and Ryuka asks her if the old man didn't come along, and her mother tells her to call him her dad. Then Auntie Rin says she left that idiot back at home, and if he had come here, he would have stayed here forever, while Ryuka thinks that Her mom called her dad an idiot. Her mother says though she retired, it is still quite busy. Right now he is in the middle of a meeting with the princess of the other dungeon. Her mother says it was boring, so she decided to come visit her to liven her spirits. Auntie Rin asks Ryuka how is she doing, and she tells her that she is managing one way or another because recovering power is a bit difficult, but since everyone is doing their best, they are managing somehow. Her mother asks her if it is getting lonely as she has to stay here for a while, and she replies, not being able to see her is a bit lonely for sure, but getting to hang out with the 4 idiots here along with Gusan and the other monsters is pretty nice. Ryuka says it has been pretty fun, so she is not lonely, and now Van comes to hang out every day as well. Her mother asks if she is talking about Van-kun, and she says yes. Lately, he has been coming for dinner every night as well, and the 4 idiots eat with them too. Her mother asks how long has it been since he started living in the next town, and Ryuka replies, about a month or so. Her mother then interrogates if Ryuka is safe and if he didn't do anything to her, but Ryuka replies that no way, the 2 of them are just childhood friends and that is it. Then Auntie Rin says the relationship is one that matures, and it is the same with monsters and humans especially. Her mother says the ruler of all monsters, the Demon King, he was defeated by a hero a long time ago. Thus peace does not last forever, and a new hero and a Demon King will come someday with a new generation. When the next Demon King appears, when humans and monsters begin to create endless mess, yet again, what will she and Van do? Ryuka couldn't reply, so Auntie Rin went to meet Van and he asked her what is the meaning of this. She tells him instead of the generals today, she will be his opponent. Perhaps he would like to continue meeting her daughter. He has to prepare himself to face her. She is the monster who faced the Demon King herself. And Van says he will tell her right now that he will not hold back. Auntie Rin says that she has not yet, and recognizing him as being worthy to be friends with her daughter, he has to engage with her. Ryuka was 9 years old when Van used to come and meet her once a month. Once he came after a month, and Ryuka said that it seemed like he had taken a beating this month, and he told her that even so, he was able to land hits on the generals now. Van says someday he will definitely be able to beat them. Van comes by once a month. He would like to come over more, but he lives too far away, so there's no helping it. They enjoy themselves by playing Demon King versus Hero, mountain climbing competitions, and eating snacks. Ryuka tells him she has barely seen her mother or dad because of work and her bodyguards are kind of scary, so it makes her really happy when Van comes over. She was telling him a story, but when she noticed he was asleep, she said goodnight to him and thanked him for being there for her. Even after all this, they were together. Van tells her that she is drooling when he wakes up, and she tells him not to just stare. Van says he is already used to this and she would do the same things when she used to take naps as a kid, and she asks him to just forget about that already while the monster bodyguards are watching them. Auntie Rin takes Van to a place where they can create a mess. Van asks her, where are they and what is this place? And she says she has rewritten the structure of this construction area by expanding the territory to the extent of a small country, so it shouldn't be a problem. Van asks if it is still the inside of the dungeon and finds it too cool, just like a dragon. While he is preparing himself for the mess, Auntie Rin hits him directly on the face with her tail and asks if he is feeling a bit nervous, as this is a dungeon and he is an adventurer. He has to hold on to pass through the gate, and if he messes to his limit, he will become a food, and asks Van to come at her. Van takes out his sword and cuts her tail. Due to this, Rin is left in shock. She tries to beat him up, but Van dodges her, and she asks him if he is messing around with those techniques names. She says to add that they are weak, and Van takes his move again. Then Rin says he has been holding back until this point because humans generally underestimate. She tries to beat him up again, but he manages to mess with her, and she says if he intends to lose to her with that kind of attitude, he should come at her if he really wants to end her, but if he doesn't, then Ryuka will. Van says she will not do it at all and says he will not end her because that is what Ryuka and he promised each other. Van asks Ryuka what will she do in this case, and she replies nothing really. She doesn't think she will change anything. Demon Lord, humans, and confrontation, even if she had those, she wouldn't violate the policy that no one ends in this dungeon. She is sure Van is the same. Her mother asks how can say that for sure. Even though she is a childhood friend with him, she has different standpoints. Ryuka never told her mother this before, but while she was traveling with Van, she was caught by bandits. However, Van immediately saved her, but he was so angry that he forgot about her and she had to stop him when he tried to end them all. Van also suffered a lot of shock. Ryuka says she was scared because Van was almost at the point of the end too, and he was almost going to take another one to the end. That is why they made a promise then that they wouldn't end anyone, and Van doesn't want to make Ryuka cry again. Meanwhile, Van thinks if he ends Ante, he wouldn't be able to show his face to Ryuka, and she is her child after all. Ryuka told her mother from now onwards, whatever happens, she doesn't want to live a life without Van. Then her mother asks her if she doesn't think her relationship as a childhood friend will change, and if she doesn't believe it will ever end. Ryuka replies of course she doesn't, because once a childhood friend is always a childhood friend. Broad could say it was the first time in her life. It was the second in Broad, he says. It was the only time. Ryuka and Gu are having a meeting, and Ryuka tells her to go away, and then her mother says she will acknowledge her resolve. While messing with Van, Auntie Rin asks him if he would give up on meeting Ryuka, and he thinks he wants to get an opening, but the tail and neck coming from the shadows are troublesome. If he doesn't go down that defense, he will be no good then. Van tells Auntie that he is going to use his powers now, so she has to protect herself, and she says, how can he talk to her like that? Van uses a self-taught sword style due to which the ground comes up, and he manages to beat Auntie Rin and squeezes her hand while she shouts in pain. She says her body isn't moving and everything in there has been stopped. She thinks this guy has reached the point at which he cannot just control his own powers but the others too. Auntie Rin cannot control the pain, so she asks Van to release the grip as she accepts her defeat. Van thinks that this style's power is too loose, and the moment he swings down, the sword breaks. If that is the case, then the technique is a no, while Auntie keeps asking him to release the grip as she accepts her defeat. Then Van asks her if she made a test all of a sudden, and she says she wanted to confirm if he was ready to face future problems, and she didn't expect him to be of this level. Auntie Rin says that she has to admit he has gotten stronger, and she can also see why Ryuka has fallen for him. Ryuka comes running towards her mother, and she couldn't believe that she made a clone, but she came here to mess with Van all alone, and her mother always disliked Van. However, it is not the same for Ryuka's dad though, as he loves him too. Ryuka's mother asks Van to take care of her daughter, and Van says he will do it. Ryuka's mother doesn't like him calling her auntie, so she tells him to call her Majesty. Ryuka and Van are talking about the introduction thing, and her mother finds them cute. After a while, her mother tells them she is going to leave, so Ryuka asks her if she is already leaving. She could have stayed a little longer, and her mother says sorry to her because she came here while her husband was in a meeting. Ryuka asks her to spell some regards to her dad too, and then asks the four idiots what happened to them. The four idiots tell her that their majesty took them to another room so that they could be lectured. Her mother told them to prepare themselves to give Ryuka her respect, and if they do not obey it, then she will end them. Then her mother says to Van, since she messed with him, she will give him a little warning, that is, to be careful of the great hero. Van isn't sure what is she saying and thinks the seniors are also talking about something of that sort. Her mother says she has seen him before and he is on another level. She tells them he will come here eventually. She wonders if he will get along, and Ryuka finds it exciting to hear it. Her mother warns them to be careful, and Ryuka assures her there is no need to worry. No matter who comes, they will be fine and laugh. While leaving, her mother tells Ryuka to make sure to eat well and says to both of them to get along with each other. Van is happy that he hasn't seen Auntie Rin in a while, and Ryuka says to be able to beat her mom, he is awesome. Van says that her mother is strong, while Mino-san says he is treated as a son and it was a test of skill as a son-in-law. Harpy asks in a state of shock if that is what Majesty meant by getting along with each other. Then her mother hugs Ryuka and tells her to make sure to use proper protection, and Ryuka says she will. It is a Christmas event in the dungeon Noa Sanajimi. Van is entering inside the event, and Ryuka tells her that they are all set. He says she really goes all out every year, and all the monsters were even cosplaying. Ryuka says going all out on seasonal events is her motto, and then she says that they should start this party. Both of them sit together to open the Christmas gifts and see some teddies and bags, so they get super happy. Ryuka sleeps with the teddy she got as a gift, and Vaughn goes back to his home. Harpy is wondering why did this end so wholesomely, even in this romantic night, and they don't know what are they going to do for 6 hours. Mina-san comes up with the idea that they should play that game again, and Okun says they are adults, so they will not look good while playing that game. In the dungeon, the announcement is made for the first time. They are holding a match between 2 different communities. They have 8 monsters who are in love with the Dragon Queen, and which dungeon's crew is fit to serve Lady Dragon is going to be decided on the basis of the match. With that, they introduce the warriors, who will determine their fate. Then Gusan calls the monster who has a tough physique known as the mutant cobalt, Woolkin. And then she calls the girl with her tremendous speed and hyper voice, she is the older sister known as Harpy-san, onto the stage. The second match will be between the guy who has specialized in traps, the chief of the trap squad, the elite brains from the orc family known as Okun, and lastly, their reliable captain and the strongest Minotaur, Mino-san. She says these 4 are team forever idiots. Then she calls the one who got the face of a producer, they can call him Guri Gura, and the other one specializing in messing things, the beast who wasn't interested at first but now wants to come near Lady Dragon Queen. The host announces to be ready to see some action and then says the next up is a girl, simple enough. They have one hand known as Katsi Kat-san and then announces Uni-san, for whom idol love is his path in life, the model unicorn Uni-san. She says these are the 4 challengers from the other dungeon, and Okun thinks if those intros weren't kind of odd. The 4 idiots think that Gusan is really into this, and they don't know why this turned into some festival, and they don't know if there are going to be more matches like this. On the other side, the monster thinks if these guys aren't a bit laid back, and the unicorn says it must be nice. Mino-san thinks what they say and thinks they shouldn't underestimate them. They will show them that they are just fanboys who could never protect Lady Queen, not like Team Forever idiots can. Amidst, Gusan introduces the judge, who is their very own Lady Dragon Queen. Everyone is shocked to see her as a judge, and they can't believe that it is really her, while Ryuka is thinking, why is this happening? When Ryuka looks down, she sees Van hiding there, so she asks what is he doing here, and he says he is worried about them. They are always messing things up, even though they are friends. Ryuka thinks she is the one who is worrying here and pushes Van back in when he tries to look out. Each match will consist of 3 events, and the first team to win 2 matches will be the victor. Mino-san is confident that their strength is better in every way, and if they move fast, they get this. They have to forget the best of the 3, they will rush in and take them down. Gusan announces that it is time for the first match. She says they will have each of them draw a portrait of the Lady Dragon Queen, and then they will have the Lady Dragon Queen judge, and the team who creates the most appealing work will be the victor. Mino-san is wondering what kind of show is this, a variety show? And wonders what will happen to their combat skills and powers. Gusan says that messing around will end too quickly, so this is fairer. But more importantly, she thought this would be more interesting. Then the girl from the other team says to Mino-san that if he is scared, he will lose Grandpa, and Mino tells her to watch it, and says he is not her grandpa because he is just 28 years old. The 4 idiots say they will not back down from any challenge, and for the Lady Dragon Queen, they will win this. Gu tells them their time limit is 1 hour and the first match begins. The team Heavenly is making the portrait, and their speed is staggering, and it looks like they are no strangers to art. They have finished in the blink of an eye, but no one knows how are the drawings. Ryuka checks their work and says, they did nice work. The queen checks everybody's work, and The Team Heavenly says to the Team Forever Idiots to watch it as they put their love for the Lady Queen into their work, and they are thankful for that effort, that they polish their skill and came up with the greatest fantasies. Then the unicorn shows his portrait and says, like, the Lady Queen, he could draw this with eyes closed. The heavenly rulers have all produced spectacular pieces, and the confidence in their work shows on their faces. Gu waits for the Lady Dragon Queen's evaluation, and she gives them the like. The Team Heavenly gets super happy when they get a like from the one and only, the Lady Dragon Queen, and today is the best day of their lives. Gu announces that the heavenly rulers are crying tears of joy, and the Team Forever Idiots are suddenly under pressure. Mino-san says they have to draw something that gets an even better score, and then they finally reveal their portraits, but no one likes them at all. The Forever Idiots team says they are all just warriors and they cannot draw anything other than blueprints. So then the Lady Dragon Queen evaluates while the Team Heavenly is super happy and thinks that this is going to be their end. Manu-san says it is all up to him and he needs to serve the Lady Dragon Queen. Then the host asks the queen which one she likes, and she says she thinks Katsy's portrait is cute and asks Van which one he likes. He says that the unicorn's drawing was crazy good and the monster gets happy that he is being there too. Van keeps staring at Ryuka, so she tells him to stop it, as it is pretty embarrassing for her, and he says they are really beautifying her. Both of them are whispering so that no one finds out. Gu says that Mino-san's brush is flying and she feels the power and she is not sure what in the world could he be drawing. Mino-san keeps drawing and the announcement is made that the time is up, and he says just double check them for him. Wool and Okun ask which one is he talking about, so he shows the drawing he drew. Wool and Okun say this is marvelous and tell him that he cannot draw Van like this because they will find out. Mino-san says to show them his passion, and then everyone will understand while the announcement is made if the team's forever rulers are arguing over something while Unicorn senses something bad for his team. Meanwhile, fluid comes out of Harpy-san's nose, which ruins the drawing, due to which the T Forever loses the first match. Mino-san's drawing is disqualified, and he says what a development that the first match goes to the heavenly rulers. Last time, the position under the Lady Dragon Queen was locked in a match with Team Heavenly Rulers, and the first round ended in an overwhelming defeat with Harpy-san out of the competition by hurting herself. Team Heavenly is calling Team Forever idiots, that they are losers, and they feel like their feelings for the Lady Dragon Queen are superior. One more loss by Team Forever Idiots means the final victory for Team Heavenly Rules. Mino-san says they cannot afford to lose the next match. With that, the next match is being started. Gusan says next is something practical. It is a power collection showdown. Both teams will be confronting adventurers and work to collect power from them, and the Lady Dragon Queen will be judging their performance. The power from humans is very important for them as a vital resource for Ether Air and their workshops. Ether Air is a magical tool that resolves all the complicated stuff about air, indoor lighting, temperature, oxygen content, pressure, and everything else in the dungeon. The power from humans is collected by letting them come inside, and then using magic and mess-withing them, which is then absorbed through the walls and floors. This time the focus is to hurt the adventurers as little as possible, and this will be a challenge for both teams. Team Heavenly Rulers say that Mino-san's team has got this one in the big, but he wouldn't be so sure. They are so strong that the adventurers might run away. They are going to have the home field advantage. The unicorn calls the Team Forever Idiots and says he has a proposal for them and asks how about a replacement for Harpy-san, and they can add that Sucky to their team. Gusan asks what is Uni. Uni-san offered a member to Team Forever Idiots as a backup player, and Unicorn says it seems like they lot think she is so great, so why don't they give them one little presentation. Unisan is sure she will do great by their dungeon standard, that is, while Minasan team members are pissed after hearing it. Unisan then says perhaps she actually managed to get them to promote her beyond her station with her love-sharing technique. He thinks with this they cannot back down, and he looks forward to seeing them hurt and trying to work with that for nothing. Manhwa-san asks him to bring it on while Saki-kun enters the ring, but Saki wonders if she will have no chance against Yunio-san and the others, while Manhwa comforts her and says, It is all right, as they have all witnessed her efforts, and she will not lose to someone like him. In fact, this is a perfect opportunity to show them how wrong they are. Okukan assures her that they will back her up, and they should win this together. Team Forever idiots motivate her. If she does it like always, she will win. Van is watching them and thinks about their injuries, while Saki-kun agrees to go into the ring and win the match. Okukan tells her to leave the behind-the-scenes work to him, and she and Mino-san will be taking the lead in collecting the power wool, and he will be counting on them to support him behind the scenes. An announcement is made for Team Forever to come in the middle levels, and all of them are ready to go there. Wool tells Harpy-san to watch over them from the grave, but Okun tells him not to. Just end her like that. A screen is developed by the Traps Department Assembly, which is almost a hall size, and previously their Lady Queen used it to peep on Van. Van tries to come out, but Ryuka hides him back and says not to mind, while Uni-san finds it cute. Ryuka tells them all to look. It seems like some adventurers showed up, and those are Van's senpai. They say it seems kinda quiet today and aren't sure where are the monsters. They decide to be cautious because it seems more unusual than before. They listen to some monsters talking to each other, and they think that the monsters are messing around. Senpai says that Saki has been stuck working on the first floor lately, and the other one asks if that is Minotaur, and if that is a super strong boss. Saki falls on Mino-san's feet, and she says sorry to him. Mino says all he has left is her, and he asks her not to toss him away. Senpai think if they are breaking up because they sound like that, and they think it is a chance to keep moving. Meanwhile, Gusan is also confused if Mino and Saki are breaking up because she couldn't get it, and then Harpy-san gets up to say she is here to explain. She explains that this is usually Orkun's spot, while everyone is confused that she came back to life, and she says it wasn't quick enough for the match, but of course, a general will heal quickly. Orkun's specialty is explaining things, and he is the type that likes trapping adventurers and then explaining how they will slowly end. She says there is no need to worry as his explanations are quite good, and Ryuka says she doesn't want to hear these weird rundowns of her lackeys though. Then Harpy continues and says that in likelihood this is the situation where a woman makes her boyfriend mad, which gets the breakup talk started. Uni-san isn't sure why they chose to do this act, and Wool comes up as if he is his ex. He asks Saki if this is her new man who got caught up with a woman like her, and Ryuka says that it is. Like Wool morphed into incomprehensible horror. Wool calls her an idiot woman and says she is too selfish and also a loser. He says he is all annoyed now and all she has going for herself is that she has a nice face. Uni-san thinks that this is some kind of return against them, and Wool says to Saki that if even her new boyfriend is tired of her, she is nothing now. Mino gets super angry and Woolen tells him not to talk to her like that, and he beats him up. Then he tells Saki not to listen to him at all, and she asks Mino if he wasn't mad at her until now, to which he replies he was. He was mad at himself for being the kind of man who would make her cry, while on the other side, Ryuka says his earlier annoyance was nothing then. Mino-san is a good guy at heart, while Harpy asks if his character isn't a dynamic one. Saki tells Mino that he is too kind and she thinks he is amazing. He is just so different from her last boyfriend that she worries for no reason. Both of them start to come close to each other while Ryuka is wondering what is this. Uni-san asks them what they get out of this little act, and Harpy tells him to just wait and watch. The senpai over there somehow like it, and energy started to overflow from the adventurer somehow, while Uni-san is left in shock. Then Harpy tells him the person's energy can overflow just from their emotions, just as power can come from anger and determination. If one sees something cute or that makes their heart flutter, then their power can start flowing. The announcement is made that the breakup act made the adventurer stop there, and their love made his power overflow. The senpais cannot go ahead because he is too weak against a cute girl, and the other one says, this isn't practically emotional. No matter how they look at it, it is an act. The ex appearing out of nowhere like this is too good to be a coincidence. Plus, the way they went from breakup to sort things was far too quick. Besides, look at their faces. They look so embarrassed. Senpai understands now that they really pulled him in with that one. The announcement is made that it is a close miss and the adventurers have figured it out. Mino says that scenario was just a little too much, and Gusan asks if this was a failure after all. Unison gets super happy and says, "Look at that. It was just too much for them to handle and they have shown them another failure." Saki says that is all because of her mistakes. Mino-san comforts her and says it is not her mistake, so she doesn't have to worry about it. He tells her that she did her best and he is proud of the way she fought together. Mino says thanks to her for helping him out, and Saki thinks he is watching out for her even now, and she really is just a failure. Then she wonders if she might like him. Saki-san realizes that all that was real, while Senpai falls to the ground and says, "That is the face of a lady in love." Their power starts to flow in a huge amount, and the team, Forever Idiots, successfully make it through the power recovery stage. The host asks the Lady Dragon Queen how did they, and she says, "They really did amazingly. Saki's power is more than usual today, and they did a good job." Harpy says making them not to meet so they would pull off this drama. And then Saki-san's face was drawn out as well. She asks Okun if he was 3 steps ahead of this, and he laughs and says, "This is his explanation of power at work. It seems they have been able to reveal it." Unisan couldn't believe that Saki defeated those adventurers and said, "What was that look on her face?" Harpy tells him that Saki is a good girl, and Uni says he can approve of it as a unicorn. This cannot be. This is even rarer than some artifacts. Unisan says his consciousness and his head all hurt because he didn't notice despite being a unicorn. Unkun says he is just taking damage for no reason, and Wool thinks that guy feels the same way as Mino-san. Then the announcement for the next team is made, and Yunu-san tells his companions that they have to retrieve the power and come out on top. He says to Pork-san that he is relying on him, and Pork says who cares about emotions, they just have to beat them up. The cat girl says if the opponent is a guy, she will make sure to hurt him nicely. The team goes to the floor and everyone is watching to see who would win this round, and then Van comes out. He says to everyone, even the people in town know all about the dungeons plan here, so anyone overdoing it is someone that isn't part of their guild, really. He says the ones who hurt that first floor goblin and went overboard were them, while the heavenly team doesn't know. What is he saying is they cannot hear him from there. The heavenly ruler's companion gets angry at Van, and he says he will beat him up as much as he wants, and there is no need to worry because he will make sure not to end him. Instead, he will turn them into cattle so he can use them to farm. The cat girl says this guy looks like he doesn't have any power, and laughs out loud. The monster thinks he is a weakling by looking at him, and they think coming alone was his real mistake. The monster gets angry at Van and says he better be prepared as he is going to hold him and take all his man, and makes fun of Van. Ryuka thinks that the monster is an idiot, but she feels good. After a while, an announcement is made that the winner of the second round is the Team Forever Idiots. Mino-san doesn't feel like it was their win, though. Everyone motivates the heavenly rulers to chin up, and the host asks everyone to give them a round of applause while they are terrified. The host tells them they can relax. Van left right after beating them all up. Unisan asks who is that adventurer as he is on a different level. Unisan says to Mino-san that he admires his strong spirit, but Mino tells him it will not survive this round as he is their opponent now. And Unisan angrily says to him, it is him who will not survive. Mino-san thinks they will decide once and for all who will earn the title of the little lady's subordinates. Gusan announces it all comes down to one match, and the final showdown is a bonus match known as the Lady Dragon Queen Quiz. The quiz covers all things about the Lady Dragon Queen, and the contestants are Wool-kun and Gura-san. Each correct answer will grant them to beat the other opponent, and whichever team falls first determines the victor. All of them are motivated, and Wool-kun says to the Lady Dragon Queen that he will not let her down, while the other idiots are motivating him. The first question is, what present did the Lady Dragon Queen receive from her father for her 6th birthday? And Gura-san says he knows the correct answer, but the Lady Queen allows him to say, he says she got a teddy, and Ryuka agrees with it, so the first point goes to the heavenly rulers. Then the other question is asked, what food totally crossed the queen out when she was 10, and what trouble did she face when she was investigating a trap? Gura-san says she got stuck in the slimy pit, and another point goes to him. Gura-san gets 3 points in a row, so Gura-san says even Mino-san will feel that. Meanwhile, the Team Forever Idiots are shocked that the Gura-san answers unbelievably fast, and they are not sure what is the reason behind it. Gura shows them the original book written on the Lady Dragon Queen, which is a fan book. This book contains the Lady Dragon's personal information, and it is written by the fans. and the Heavenly Kings have memorized the entire book. Ryuka questions who wrote something like that, and Gura-san says, "The author is Harpy-san," while Mino-san is shocked and he can't believe him. Harpy-san says she would never write something like that, and then realizes maybe she did write it. The Team Forever Idiots get super angry at her and they say she really messed up everything this time. And Gusan says she checked this book upon publication and it is all good. While Ryuka is angry and she tells them they need her permission for that, then Gura-san says thanks to Harpy-san, he got the appeal of the Lady Dragon Queen, and he says victory is still a victory. They say the Lady Dragon's Queen's new subordinates are the Heavenly Kings. Team Forever Idiots are at the end of the road and on the verge of giving up, and they still have a chance to come back. Gusan asks the next question, what is the first present the Lady Dragon Queen gave a certain male friend? Gusan asks, what kind of question is that? While Wool tells them that it was a handmade picture book, and Ryuka says the answer is correct. Van says that thing is on display at his house like a fine china. Well, Ryuka is quite embarrassed at the moment. Mino-san beats the Uni-san with all the power, and this may turn the tide of victory. Gura-san says he doesn't have that information about a male friend, and Wool says the queen herself confirmed it, so it is true. Then another question is asked, how many times a boy stayed a night in Queen's room? And Wool answers 15. Gusan then asks about the Queen's most frequently played game with the boy, and Wool says it is a one-on-one basketball game. Team Forever Idiots come back with full energy, and the Heavenly Kings are almost done for, and the Queen isn't looking good either. Gusan then presents the last question. Does Lady Dragon Queen have a boy she likes? While Okun says she cannot just ask that. Wool says she does like a boy and answers it immediately. And Gusan asks Ryuka if this is correct. And the Lady Dragon Queen says they have got it wrong. She says it is not like it is a love or anything, but she cannot even say that she hates him at all. The Lady Dragon Queen is confused and she says they are just childhood friends and she doesn't know what the future holds for them. She declares this question is invalid while everyone is murmuring that she totally has a boy she likes. Team Heavenly's hopes and dreams are no more. And Gura-san says he thought that the idols are not allowed to date. Team Forever's opponents are down, so it is Mino-chan's chance now. But Mino says there's no need to hit them again. After hearing this, Uni-san is left in shock. And Uni-san thinks it should have been him, not him. And Mino-san asks what is wrong with him. Uni-san gets angry and hits Mino-san. He says there is no way he is giving up yet. Mino-san is super angry and he says he is not giving up yet at all because he cannot believe that Lady Dragon Queen is dating some guy. Gusan announces that Uni-san started swinging and that is breaking the rule. Gura-san tries to stop Uni-san, but he tells him to hold it because he cannot accept his defeat. Gusan announces that the Heavenly Kings are automatically disqualified and the victory goes to the Team Forever Idiots. Mino-san says to Uni-san, earlier he said that the quiz would end only after one of them is defeated, so they will not stop now. Ryuka says that was their chance to win, but she isn't sure what is Mino-san doing. Van says this guy is nothing for Mino-san, he must have another reason for this. Mino-san says to Uni-san that if he wants to go, then he can go, and both of them start to create a... None of them back down, and Uni-san asks Mino what is wrong with them, as their idol admitted she has a guy friend. How can they smile like that? He says it is an act of betrayal to her fans, so they should be screaming, crying, and throwing up. Mino-san says that it is their selfish idea of standing that is wrong, and the queen has always been the cutest person in the world. Uni-san says she is not an idol, and Mino wants him to explain the official fanbook, and says that is all Harpy's fault. The queen exists for the world to worship and any male presence must be eliminated. They will not get to see that face she made again. Mino-san says it was super cute and he asks what loving an idol means to him. Uni-san mentions he just cannot stand the thought of her having a boyfriend and he wants her to stay single for at least 10 more years. And Mino says it is such a bad thing to say. Mino asks him if he is that disappointed to see that she has a boyfriend and asks if that is all Queen is to him. Mino asks why he even stands the Lady Dragon Queen, and then a monster appears and questions Team Heavenly what they think they are doing. He asks them to feed him more energy as he is lacking it, and what he needs is a hero's pure energy. He tells them to hurry up and bring them a hero as that is all they are good for. Unity and his team are tired of both their minds and their bodies, which is why they have no end policy for humans and monsters alike. They actually profit like that because Black Dragon's daughter rules it, Unisan could picture it so clearly as a king in a gentle world. That is what their idol is. Unisan tells Mino not to steal away their only bit of happiness, and Mino says he doesn't care about it at all and tells him to give a rest to his little messed story. Mino gets it now. They are seeking salvation from Lady Dragon Queen. Musan bows and says no wonder they don't see eye to eye, and Mino says they are the monsters of this dungeon, and they are here to protect the queen. Those were their orders from the start, but more than that, the fact that she is the strongest, loveliest, and most kind-hearted person makes them want to protect her all the more. Lady Dragon Queen living a healthy and happy life is all they want, and that is more than enough for them. Mino-san asks Uni-san to listen, that he is not going to allow anyone else near her at all. But if she likes someone, or even gets married, that is fine by him. Harpy says he had them in the first half, not going to lie. He sounds like an overprotective dad ranting about his daughter. Uni-san thinks their idol already has a team she needs, and a person such as himself is unworthy of standing the queen. Mino asks him if he is sure about that, as he made some incredible fan art. Mino-san admits that he loves his art, and Uni-san couldn't believe other fans who stand the queen this much existed. Uni-san says sorry to Minu for everything and says being able to stand someone so beloved is a blessing, and he has met a really good group of friends thanks to that. Team Heavenly also agrees with Uni-san, and Uni-san says in all their time of standing, his comrades were also a big part of his happiness. Mino says they should talk again sometime and says thanks to Uni, who is his fellow Dragon Queen stan. Both of the team members say sorry to each other, and they get together and they accept whatever punishment will be announced for them. However, they acted on their own rules, so they want to leave the rest of the dark demons out of it. Ryuka says she has a lot to say, but for now, she says thanks to them for painting her wonderful pictures. Then she's going to say something about the dark demons, but Uni-san excuses her and says if she stands this close to him, then his heart is going to fail. He asks her if she can keep around 5 meters distance between them, and Mino says it would have been impossible for them to work for her anyway. The final match has been ended between the two dungeons, and Okun says those guys made a huge mess for nothing. The Origins became the new division of this dungeon, and level 45, Ogre-kun was chosen as the new boss. Inferno-kun had been defeated by Gold-san, and his skill was average. He is currently making efforts to improve the dungeon's welfare program, and the Okun power harvesting team seems to be helping. The Heavenly Kings are also super motivated. They give it their all whenever the queen cheers them up. Mino says it is time to choose a new floor boss, and Wool tells them that Gobsan wants to recommend someone. Then Harpy says that first they need a plan for the great hero, as he is supposedly on Van's level, and Ryuka angrily tells them not to have a meeting in there. Ryuka says to the monsters that her happiness is everyone else's happiness, but really, the reverse is true too, and Ryuka is really grateful for them. All the monsters are crying after hearing this, and they say they are with her till the end, and they will protect her until they end. They ask for her permission to let her stand for her, and she accepts it, while telling them not to cry anymore. In a certain dungeon, Mino is happy as they collected a great deal of power from adventurers this month. Okun says by changing control of Ogre from their last match, Dungeon's influence has grown considerably. They all of this to their Lady Queen. Ryuka tells them to quit fooling around and tells them to get back to work, and Harpy says it is endless and wants the third floor's report. Wool says the fewer adventurers come around, the more paperwork they have to deal with. Then Harpy tells Orkan to make some magical device that helps them with their work, and he asks her if she could be more specific. She says something that can store information, do calculations, and make documents, and whatever they write is displayed on the crystal. Orkan says that seems pretty much impossible to make, and Ryuka tells them to end that chat. One of them asks Ryuka if there is any problem, and she asks how can they get an evaluation of this dungeon from an adventurer's point of view. Harpy says they could put a suggestion box on each floor, but Ryuka doesn't like this idea. She says if Van comes, she will ask him, and Mino asks if that would actually be helpful. While they are talking about Van, he comes in, and the monster walks out of the room. Ryuka looks at them while they are walking in a queue and says, this looks more like an assembly line than usual. She keeps waiting for Van, and he finally comes in and he asks her what is up with the monsters today. He asks her if he came at a bad time, and she says he is fine and there is no need to worry. They tell him they took their ogre organs recently, so they are super busy with the paperwork for that and registering the monsters and stuff. This is putting a load on their usual work, and Van says it is a good thing that he brought them a treat. He takes out meat pies and massages Ryuka's shoulders, too. She keeps asking him to massage her head, face, and neck, and Van thinks she got a lot of stress out, so he says he will help her with some stuff, too. Ryuka says she cannot let an adventurer do dungeon work, but he insists, so she accepts it and says she is putting together some data and she would like to get an evaluation of their dungeon from an adventurer. Van says there is no problem in it and he will go ask some adventurers from his guild. He runs towards the guild while Ryuka thinks she really just wants to hear his opinion, as he is an adventurer. Van goes out there and requests the adventurers to fill out the forms. Then he comes back into the dungeon and says he collected everyone's response, and Ryuka takes a look at it. The adventurer tells them that the 4th floor's staircase is really steep, so they should fix it. The other adventurer says the difficulty level is high, but it is a good dungeon. They keep reading all the responses, and there are a variety of responses from the adventurers. Ryuka says to Van they all gave him serious answers, and Van says there are some other requests too. An adventurer wants to meet a slime that can dissolve women's clothes. This request is made by Senpai, and Van tells him that is why he doesn't get any girls. The other Senpai says that his equipment got taken last week, so he wants it back. Ryuka says to let her know what it looks like, and she will search for it. Then they bring out Goldie-san's request. He wants a good opponent and says it will be really helpful. He wants a floor where he can mess with Van Kun and he will face Van over there if he shows up. Van says this guy has a different type of mental strength than the 4 idiots. Then Van took out another request about the 32 floors. They were surrounded by some magician in a room, and Goldo told them not to worry, he would surely protect them. Mino-san is watching Ryuka and Van working together and says this is actual work compared to what they are used to. Van asks Ryuka, this list is right? And she says it is, fine, and asks him if he can do another one. Meanwhile, the monster is watching them, and they think they have got that childhood friend who is totally comfortable with each other. There's nothing new about it, but it is actually better, and they think it is all coming along. Ryuka sees them watching over them, so she tells them to leave them alone. Ryuka and Van work for a while, and they are finally done. Ryuka calls Van a lifesaver and asks what should they do now. Van says she must be tired from working, so they should just rest. However, Ryuka puts her head on his chest and he asks her what is wrong and picks her up in his hands. Van takes her to the bed and lays her down and leaves for his home. The next morning, Ryuka wakes up and says she overslept. Even though she got lots of help, she still slept like this. When she goes out, she sees the 4 idiots been frozen in shock since yesterday. Van brings meat pies for Ryuka and says she really loves those things while she is eating them. She says it is amazing how much meat they pack into the pie from town, and she wants one more. Meanwhile, Gusan comes in and says she brought cookies for them and tells her that tonight's dinner is stewed and gratin. Van appreciates Gusan's cooking and says her cooking is delicious and he is going to end up way too much. Ryuka says it is fine as they are growing kids after all. Ryuka gained a bit of weight, and Harpy says this is actually good because thick thighs are in nowadays. Guasan isn't so sure about that because if she stays like this, it will be bad news not just for the queen, but for the childhood friend too. Ryuka asks if they have any dieting tips, and Harpy says even though she usually eats a lot, she just doesn't seem to gain weight. Guasan asks to forgive her, but her weight has remained the same since she was created. Harpy says to her that she is made of stone though, and tells Ryuka that she can totally go on the diet and lose weight. However, if they are talking about weight loss, then exercise is the key. Ryuka mentions she doesn't hate sports or anything, but they are just a hassle, and Harpy tells her that she knows something fun. She says some night exercises with Van, and Gusan say she heard chicken is great for dieting, especially the main meat as it is low in calories, has low fat, and is a good source of protein. Kokun enters there and says he overheard their conversation and asks Ryuka to let him handle this matter, but Ryuka tells him to stop listening to them. Then she asks him if he can make a magical device for her to lose weight easily, and he says there are no shortcuts around dieting. He says frequent exercise and strict diet management are the key, but if she isn't prepared to adjust her lifestyle, she needs to educate herself on balanced nutrition for her diet and work, or else she will never lose weight. Orkun knows a lot about it because his hometown is famous for training soldiers in the cave. They get lessons on strength training and dieting in his hometown. Ryuka says that he is not slim himself, and Harpy says if they know what they say, those who cannot do teach. But Okun angrily tells her to shut it as he is the expert here. Okun tells Ryuka that it will not be easy, but he thinks that some things like this might happen, so he turns one of the dungeon's traps into this. He shows her the dungeon's diet course where he places climbing, spinning, the wrapped wall, and many more such traps. Effectively working here with full determination will bring the maximum results. Okun says to Ryuka that if she is able to run this entire course, she will lose weight for sure. Ryuka is motivated and thinks that she should do this, and she's going to have these extra pounds right off. Ryuka runs in there and completes all the exercises, and Okun says the whole point of this is to burn calories. She says this will be easy and is motivated to work harder. Meanwhile, on the 45th floor, the Black Dragon Queen is breathing calories, and the monsters there say she emerged from the depths of the dungeon. They thought that they could advance further since the Inferno was gone, but perhaps the dungeon's entire balance is ending. They don't know what in the world is happening, and everybody runs from there when it gets hot. Ryuka says that she can detox here since it is so hot here on the 45th floor, and it feels good to burn calories this way. This is how she is going to melt extra fat off. Van is also there, and he says this is pretty pointless, and she asks why is he here? He says he heard that she is here, so he came over, and he thinks he knows what is going on here. He says doing this will not make her lose weight. Van tells her that adventurers use up a lot of their power while they are messing with strong monsters, and when their energy runs out, they burn their calories, but for her, she has an infinite power, and she could breathe flame for an eternity and it would do nothing. Ryuka feels embarrassed because, on top of wasting nearly an hour, the person she wanted to hide this from saw right through her. Van tells her that she needs to do a lighter exercise that taps into her energy, and running is a good choice for it. Ryuka says it has to be something that is painful, and Van says he will go and get his exercise clothes too. Ryuka asks if he is going to run with her too, and he says he will be her running buddy. He mentions it is easy to push on when they have support. Later, Van tells her to keep running as she is finally breaking a sweat, and she says he shouldn't have been bringing snacks every day. Van says eating them made her so happy, how could he not bring them? Everyone will continue dieting together as the monster bodyguards are also watching them. A guy named X is a member of the adventuring party called Dog Fang. He is not quite as strong as his companions, but he is useful on support and as a rear guard. He says if they capture the dungeon together, he can legit become an A-class adventurer someday. Or so he thought. The leader throws him out of the team because he is not worthy, according to him. The B-class party of Dogfang has made the highest up to 422. The members are Zyru-san, Twist-san, and Hope-san. The one they are kicking out right now is X-san. Van and Goblin have developed a teacher-student relationship even since Pan helped Goblin when the staff was short. Van says throwing out of the party is a big thing. He has seen it a lot in Ryuka's games and books. He says Ryuka will probably be excited when she hears about it, and Pan asks Goblin if this kind of thing happens a lot. He says that it is not usual for parties to switch around their members, but this is the first he has seen one get out at such a time. Okon appears in the meantime, and he asks Pan-kun to listen carefully. If this group split up takes a bad turn, they will step in. Exon on the other side asks Zyru-san why he wants him to go, and Zyru says how many times he has to tell him that the skill gap between them is too big and he is a burden on them. X says it is true that he is weaker than the rest of them, and that is why he started giving support and taking up the chores and cooking and stuff. Zyru says they do not need any of that anymore while Pan is watching them and says what a sad position to be in. Eeks begs Zyru to let him in. He will try his best to get stronger, but Zyru asks him to prove it right now. He tells him to make it past the 30th floor and get his hands on the dark crystal, and then they will change their mind about him if he brings it back all by himself. X says it is not possible as it is an A-class adventurer's floor, and he is basically telling him to be no more. X thinks about it and says he sees how it is, he's going to do it, and will make them regret kicking him out. Pan and Goblin hide as they see X coming towards them, and Goblin says they couldn't even create a mess, and asks if the monsters further down are okay. From here on, X will prove how great he is. He will achieve success on his own and leave the rest of his party in the dust, or that is how the story usually goes, says Pan-kun. Goblin asks where he heard this kind of story, and he tells him in a book he borrowed from a friend, and there are a lot of stories about banishment. Goblin says his friend has a strange taste in stories. The story continues and all the team members say sorry to X, and Zyru says X underestimates himself too much. He really has the ability to go up to the A-class adventurers like Gold-san. X doesn't realize that his team is the one holding him back. They were barely C-class, but with his support, they got good enough to be B-class. Zyru tried to tell X about it over and over again, but he didn't get it, and he hoped that by forcing him out, X could acknowledge his own strength. He could forget the likes of them and be an A-class adventurer. And Pan says it is a classic plot twist. X's team members had good intentions for him, and they thought X would hate them. Pope asks if Zyru is okay, as Zyru and X are childhood friends, and Zyru says X shouldn't be stuck on his level with him. It is fine for his sake. Zyru is alright with losing his connection. It is time for them to head back. Goblin says companionship is complicated. A person can part ways for this sort of reason too. And Pan says this is wrong, he is going to bring X-san back here. After seeing this, Goblin asks Pan what has gotten inside him, and Van says, banishing a party member is whatever, but banishing a childhood friend is unacceptable. Goblin asks why is he so worried about this, and Van asks him to detain the others. Van runs and thinks this isn't his problem and he is probably acting on his own selfishness, but still, if it is about childhood friends, he can stand by and do nothing. The monsters on the 30th floor ask Pan why is he here, and Pan asks if an adventurer called X came this way. He thinks he might have been crying. The monster shows him the guy, and Van sees him using his true powers. He thinks X is having an awakening already and thinks he is top A class for sure. The monster tells Van that X has been like that since the mid-level floors, and Van tells them to step back, he is dangerous. However, Van isn't sure if he can really clear the misunderstanding while X is in this state. X angrily says it serves them right, the ones who betrayed him, and he is going to use this power to create a mess with them. He will let them know what he felt and say his friendship with Zyru is over. The monster on that floor says they are surrounded by X, and they cannot retreat, and asks Pan-kun to hurry up. X is getting more and more negative. When Pan comes back and knocks X out, Goblin turns around to see what happened and sees X on the floor who is worried about his power. Pan tells X that he needs to have a real talk with Zyru. While Goblin is getting a deja vu feeling, Pan asks X if he thinks he ended his friendship with Zyru and angrily says they are childhood friends and that bond isn't so easily served. Pan says he will make them understand how foolish it is for childhood friends to argue. Pan is going to hurt X, but Zyru comes in between and saves X from the trouble he was stuck in. Then all of them go out together to put their strength together, and they hit Pan for what he did. Zyru says to X they thought they were holding him back from his true potential, and that is why he banished him. X says he doesn't care about that because they stepped in to save him. X says sorry for thinking about bad things, and says he just wants all of them to be together. Meanwhile, Pan also says sorry to Goblin for behaving so selfishly, but Goblin says he is satisfied with him because he showed some great skill there, not giving up until they reconciled. Pan says he has a lot of experience with scenes like that and remembers how Ryuka and he used to argue. However, they always used to sort things out in a couple of hours. Van says that something important came up, so he needs a rain check. But Ryuka says that he promised that he would play Ringo Kishiba Roadway with her. She says she was ready to pull the first all-night gaming session in a while too, and she tells this to Harpy-san. While Harpy thinks that Ryuka is too cute, and Ryuka says Van is so unreliable person. Harpy says she doesn't know about that, but Van would never be unreliable towards her unless it was super important. Ryuka asks her how can be she so sure, and Harpy says she has known that boy almost as long as her Lady Queen. About 9 years ago, a guy was beating Van and said that he stowed away in his bed again, and he already told him no kids are allowed. Van asks the guy Geezer to let go of him, and Geezer says in front of everyone that every month this kid shows up out of nowhere. Geezer is going to toss him back on the surface, and Van asks him to stop as he has somewhere to go. Van runs from there somehow, because back then Van was skilled at getting in without creating a mess and sneaking his way down unnoticed. All this was until he appeared on the lowest floor, and this is where he was required to mess. Van already had strength that put adults to shame. After all, he made it to the lowest floor all by himself, which practically nobody managed to do. However, naturally he didn't win, and their match came to an end 1 or 2 hours after it began. He looked ready to lose consciousness at any moment, but he messed with the dragon and was able to pass by. Harpy said to Mino back then that, honestly, they are taking dives so he can get through, and Mino said they should just let him in more easily. Harpy feels bad for beating Van every single time. It is an order for her, but still, what if he gets tired of it and doesn't come around anymore? Mino says she doesn't need to worry about that, and then asks her to take a look. All the monster peeks and sees Van crying and says that next time he is going to win for sure. Nanook says he breaks down every time he is out of sight, and he is aware of the farce they put on and their difference in strength. He wants to win for real. While he is crying, Ryuka shows up and says he is all beat up. Harpy says their position didn't allow them to exchange many words, but she became a guide of sorts in a match. Though Van cried many tears of frustration, he never lost the will to engage with dragons. He made great progress. About 2 years later, he was able to face them head on, and so by the time he was 12, Van beats all the monsters, and they can't believe it. Van Kun finally won, but he couldn't believe himself, and all the monsters said that he was amazing. Then the monster says they will give it everything from here that they got, and Van thinks if this isn't even their final form. Okun says to Van, those three are really something. When Ryuka hears this story, she says that she has no idea because Van never said a word about it, and Harpy says she should know how boys are. He must have a good reason for today too that he went home, and most of all, there is nothing he couldn't be doing than spending time with Ryuka. Ryuka asks Harpy to tell her more about Van, and she says it would be her pleasure to tell her about him. The next day, Van comes back with the stuff, and he says that he came back with the stuff they ordered. The guild chief says thanks to him for bringing in the stuff, and Van asks him if it isn't the time for him to retire. The guild chief tells him to shut it, as he has plenty of adventuring left in him, and then he asks Van if he packs some meat pies too. The chief asks him if he is heading out again today, and Van tells him yes, that he is, and goes to meet Ryuka again. He engages with all the monsters there, in the middle of which Ryuka comes running towards him. So Van asks what is wrong with her. She says he made it, and he has to take it easy now, and says sorry to him about yesterday. She tells him to have some cookies or take a nice warm bath, and Van asks her if she is grandma. Ryuka hugs Van, and the monsters are in shock at what is going on. Harpy tells Ryuka some lies about Van, that something happened to him when he was around 15 and he couldn't use his sword. Moreover, he got hit by magic and couldn't breathe, but he still didn't give up. Ryuka tells this all to Van, and he exposes that all these are lies said by Harpy-san, due to which she ends up getting super angry. Van looks at the books Ryuka has in her collection. He says this is kind of out of the blue, but her book collection is based on certain preferences of hers. He says someone he knows mentioned it to him, that Ryuka's collection is all about banishment, the hero being a bad guy, stuff like that. Ryuka says it is not like that, and she just has what she likes. Besides, seeing some hero get is so refreshing, while Van is thinking that the Dragon Queen jumped out there. On the other side, senpais are talking to Van, and they say, even outside the stories, he doesn't hear many good things. It seems they have been getting special treatment forever, and even with no demon kind around, they take advantage of it to live in total luxury. Van says he heard many heroes go all when they mess up, and Senpai says then there's the great hero, said to be the world's strongest, the best of the best among heroes, and he wonders what he is like. Gold appears in the middle of a conversation and says heroes are humans too, and tells them that they are misguided. Gold says a bad reputation is a hero's own personal issue after all, so it would be foolish to make generalizations. All of them agree with him and say Gold is pretty different from his image. And then Goldie says with the title like Great Hero, the person has to be strong and he would really like to challenge the hero sometime. Van says he is pretty much the opposite of what he just said. Anti-Rin warned him about the Great Hero's prominence, and he thinks if the Great Hero is really such a bad guy. Van thinks Goldie said this too, but it might be a rumor. He feels like he has heard the name of prominence somewhere. Thus, he goes out to look for it and sees a man there, but he cannot recognize him as an adventurer, so he thinks he might be from another village. Van thinks about what has happened as the person right in front of him is all spaced out. He is just standing at the entrance and doesn't know what is stopping him from going inside. Van excuses him, and the guy turns around with a big smile on his face. Van tells him the dungeon is pretty dangerous and asks if he is all right as he is zoned out. And the guy says he is fine, he was just bracing himself because he is going straight down to the bottom. The guy runs in there, and Van feels the amount of power that guy has, as he is super fast. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Goblin is wondering, what is that sound coming? While he is wondering, the guy goes in there and beats him up. And Van thinks the new guy isn't aiming to end the monsters, but it is a bad idea to mess with him here, and he will lead him down. When the guy and Van leave, Goblin says that was insane, and he asks the other monsters to get him the list of adventures. He looks for the guy on the list and recognizes that he is a great hero. In the dungeon, the code red for emergency is turned on, and the announcement is made to raise all the traps to the max, and non-combaters are to be evacuated immediately, and combaters are advised to retreat while defending. The great hero is getting closer to the queen. The queen's bodyguards are waiting for the great hero to come, and Mino-san says they will not make the same mistake they made with Golda-san. He says their opponent is the great hero, the strongest in the world. They assume he is at least on Vankun's level. Wool says they are toast now, and Mino says they still have to engage with him and they shouldn't bring the morale down. While he is motivating them, the great hero approaches them, and Van stops him by using his sword The great hero says to Van that he is the same as ever and asks if he still doesn't recognize him. He says his name is Sore Prominence, who was his next-door neighbor, the Crybaby. Van finally recognizes that he is Poo-kun and asks where. It has been 5 years now. Poo is glad that Van remembers him, and Van says sorry to him because he really had no idea, as he has changed so much. Van cannot believe that they are meeting like this and he is a hero. Poo says he cannot believe it either and finds him here where Ryoka lives. Mino thinks that Van knows the great hero, and Van introduces him to the monsters there. He says this is Poo-kun, his next-door neighbor from his village, and Poo says it is nice to meet them and he is a great hero. All the monsters are concerned and shocked that Van met another childhood friend. Ryuka sees a cute little dog and Van says it has a red garnet on his head. Ryuka asks Wool where did he got this from, and he tells her that she is a subordinate's dog. He went home to visit his family, so he is looking after her. Wool asks Ryuka if she could play with the little dog for a bit, and she agrees to it. She takes the dog inside, but the Dig hides behind the table and asks what is wrong with her, as she is not friendly all of a sudden. All monsters can sense it instinctively, and this is the Dragon Queen, who is an overwhelming superior being. Van picks up the dog and asks if she is okay, and Ryuka is impressed that the dog warmed right up to him. Van says he takes care of animals a lot at home and then calls Ryuka near as the dog is all settled now. Ryuka picks the dog up, and everyone finds it super cute. Van and Ryuka are super close while the dog is in their hands, and she says, angrily, those strange monsters over there are surely noisy. She is targeting the monster bodyguards, who are peeping on them again. 10 years ago, in the northern Kara Kingdom, Byakua village, some guys were making fun of Poo-kun. They say it looks like he is going to lose again, and they call him with different names to make fun of him. Poo-kun keeps crying while Van comes in between with a dragon, and he tells them all not to be mean to Poo-kun at all. Everyone gets scared that Van is coming right for them with a dragon on his head, and they run out of there. After everyone disappears, Van asks Poo-kun if he is okay, and Poo says thank to him for saving him. Then Poo asks Van what is he doing, and he says that Ryuka is all healed now, so she is practicing flying. Van says those guys might come back and asks Poo to come with them, and Poo agrees to go with them. Both of them race to the clearing. When Ryuka sees Poo-kun there, she gets super happy as it has been ages since they both met. When both of them get close, they couldn't recognize each other and ask who is this? And Van already knew that this would happen. Poo says Van told him as much, but she really does have a human form, and she says this form here is her default. Poo says she has grown up to be a real beauty and a princess, and Ryuka asks him to stop as he is making her blush. Then Ryuka says that Poo-kun is really different now, and Van says he told her that the great hero is Poo-kun. Ryuka finds words to say that Poo-yun is a lot stronger than before, and Poo says that is right. When it comes to messing, Van was by far the best, and he was always at the bottom. He didn't want to be that loser anymore, so he decided to become an adventurer and left the village 5 years ago. He was also inspired by Van going off to Ryuka's dungeon every month, and Van remembers up to that point too. Ryuka says that he worked really hard to become a hero, and Poo says not exactly. He says that was a bit careless. He found a sword along the road one day. Turns out it was a sacred sword, and suddenly he was imbued with the power of a hero. Poo says being chosen as a hero meant he had to register himself at the capital, and there was no way out of it, so he went. But right then, a major incident was taking place at the capital. A group released a demon that was sealed in the center of the city, and he ended up defeating it in 2 seconds. That is how they started calling him the great hero, and all this was a bit careless. Ryuka says he speedran his development, and he tells him about it. As a great hero, he is trying his best to be a force of good for the people. Most of the work is no laughing matter, but to live up to everyone's expectations, he was told to always wear a smile. Poo says he smiled so much that his face is stuck like this now, and Van says that is from stress though. Van makes sure that Poo is okay, as it seems like the heroes are pretty disliked. And Ryuka says she even heard someone say that loves seeing heroes get beaten up. Poo says actually saying bad things is better than being relied on as a hero, and it is a true sign of peace right there. Comparatively, there are also lots of people who have accepted him and shown gratitude towards him. He even got to meet them too today. So in times like these, that makes him smile. For real is too good. Van touches Poo and says he is still such a softie, and Poo asks him to cut it out while the monsters are watching them. Okun says for a while there he was worried about what would happen, and Wol says thankfully he seemed like a good kid. Meanwhile, Mino-san angrily enters and says he is not here love sharing, and he is not here because he liked her first. All the other monsters say that Mino is the king of predictability, Mino-san asks, what is wrong with that guy over there? And he doesn't care if he is from Van's village, and Okun tells him he sounds like Gu-san. Mino-san says they have never heard of him, he shouldn't just pop up out of nowhere and be a third childhood friend. He says to Poo-kun while talking to himself not to chat with the queen, and Harpy tells him to get a hold of himself. She says it is also possible that Van is his target, and Mino says he is not here for it either. Wool asks Harpy to stop interfering in this and tells them that their thoughts about them are wrong. Harpy says she is fine with anything as long as it is adorable, and Mino starts to cry while saying this is making him uneasy to think that those two know the great hero of all things. Okun says they know him because he is their friend and he is not worried about that. And he asks everyone to take a good look at the queen. She is way closer to Van than usual, and it has been a super long time since she has been around any guy besides Van, so it is a bit dangerous for her. Most of all, Van and Pooh are having such a great time while talking, and the queen is obviously jealous. The queen cannot hide her love for Van, and Wool says to Okun that he got a sharp eye though. Harpy says the queen is no cut when she is jealous, and Okun says getting to see this sort of thing is nice too. Then Wool tells them to see there is no way this is a situation like the Mino-san said. Mino asks them how can they be so sure about it, and Harpy tells him to go and apologize to Yuna-san. Pooh asks Van what is wrong with those guys, and he tells him not to mind them, they are always like that. He asks if they always watch over with that liveliness, and asks if either of them dating right now. Ryuka asks where that came from, and he says they are all at that age, so he was wondering if they had a love story. Mino is getting angry about what is he trying to do, and Ryuka tells Pooh that she has nothing like that, and Pooh gets it. Ryuka interrogates about Pooh's love line as he is the hero of all lands, so he must be popular. Pooh says he is not popular like that, and there is a girl he likes, but they are not dating or anything. Ryuka asks him who is Umansen, and he tells her to stop looking so overjoyed about other people's business. He tells them she is a member of a party, and it is love at first sight. Okan says, it sounds like he has already got someone, so it is good. And Mino says it could be that he is a player who is trying to make up things, and Harpy tells him that there is something wrong with his brain. Ruka wants to hear the love story from the beginning during dinner time, and then they will find a 3-player game to play. Poo-yun says sorry, he has to pass on that as he is in kind of a hurry today. Poo-yun stands up and lets Van know that he needs to quickly unearth the queen, Ryuka. Angry, Van stands up to defend his childhood best friend along with the other monsters. The two take out their swords and have a blast. Van asks Ryuka to stay back. He then questions Poo-yun what's the meaning of all this. He asks for an explanation from Poo-yun. Poo-yun says he is here to destroy the Demon King's vessel, the Black Dragon Queen. That is the order he got, so he is here for unearthing Ryuka, nonetheless. But the fact that the Black Dragon Queen is Ryuka, he had no idea that he would see Van up on the surface. He puts more pressure on his sword to defeat Van, while saying that coincidence is a load of crap. It is all that ever happened to him. He adds that he had fun talking to the two, but as the great hero, he must eliminate the Demon King's vassals, even if it means he will have to unearth his friend, even if he has to risk his life competing with Van. Angry, Ryuka beats Poo-yun with her fist, asking him to take this own drama outside. Shocked, Van stands there wondering what just happened, while Ryuka looks at him annoyed and asks him to help her clean the room afterwards since it is all busted now. She looks at Van, who is worried. She asks what is that look on his face. Van asks Ryuka if she isn't worried about Poo-yun, but Ryuka says she else since Poo-yun said that he was here to unearth her. Van agrees, stating that wasn't a good look for him. They will have to make sure Poo-yun knows it. They let the monsters know that they will be right back. The monster suggests getting out there too once they recover. Outside, Poo-yun stands up from the rubble, cracking his neck and ready for strong competition. Van is a bit concerned since Poo-yun has no scratch on him. However, Ryuka says the crack in Poo-yun's mental state is pretty severe. Poo-yun says this is no big deal, stuff like this keeps happening to him all the time. Van says this is exactly why he is worried about him, but Poo-yun reminds him that they are enemies now. However, Van doesn't think that way. He still thinks that they are childhood best friends. This doesn't stop Poo-yun. He still decides to carry out the duties of a hero. With that, he swifts his sword and marches towards Van. Ryuka is so ready to teach Poo-yun a lesson. She is excited about the amount of mana he has. Poo-yun uses one of his strongest aiming techniques, because of which Ryuka and Van nearly escape from getting unearthed. Van tells Ryuka that this was a cut clean through a demon in a second slice, which amazes her. Annoyed, Puyun asks Van who allowed him to make this crappy name for his techniques. Ryuka asks Van not to provoke Puyun. He says just one of those swings has more power than her dragon breath. Van says he agrees with Antie, saying Puyun is on another level. The two try to devise a plan and defeat Puyun. Van tries to aim at Puyun from his back, however Puyun catches up to him, stating awakening this power didn't just affect his mana, it randomly upgraded his physical abilities too. He comes face to face with Van, stating he can even rival with him in this form. With that said, he uses his sword and moves it swiftly at Van, breaking Van's sword in the process. Just before he could end Van for good, Ryuka grabbed Puyun's sword with her hands, making him wonder, how come a dragon's hide could withstand the scorching heat of his blade? She tries to break the magic sword with her beating, but fails. Even her power is not enough against the magic sword. Ryuka tells Van that they can win this opposition if they break the sacred sword. Pissed off, Van tells Ryuka that his sword is already broken, so he will be bringing his hands. Ryuaka asks him to still take her words seriously. Puyun asks the two to stop opposing. This is exhausting enough already. The corners of his mouth will go up even more. Van suggests that Puyun give up. He says they can still compete, but he wouldn't want Puyun to risk his life. He says he is good to go till Puyun gives up. He is willing to be Puyun's opponent as long as Puyun likes. Ryuka asks Van if she should just stay here since he is taking it like this. Van says this is a serious match, so he will treat it like one. Van tells Puyun that he can put If off any longer. He will help Puyun finish this once and for all. Before they could do anything, Golda comes out of nowhere, breaking the tension between Puyun and Van. Golda says he sensed some strong mana and realized it was coming from here. He apologized to Van for interrupting and asks Van to allow him to take charge of his opposition. Van apologizes to Gold, stating he can't compete with him today, but Gold clarifies that he is here for Puyun. Turns out Puyun already know the legendary man Gold. Gold tells Puyun that he has some business with him right now. Raya wonders what kind of business is Goldie talking about. She questions if Puyun did something to upset Goldie. Trembling with fear, Puyun wonders he might fail if Goldie takes charge of the opposition. Soon, a very beautiful girl come in. She tells Puyun that she was searching the village high and low when she ran into her mom and dad. It was a total coincidence, so she told them all about him, and then Golde said he absolutely had to meet him. She says she is glad she got to introduce her partner to him. Turns out this is the girl Puyun likes. Meanwhile, in the low-level monster area, the monsters wonder what should they do. Should they go down and help their queen? Or should they stay here and protect the rest of the floors? The monsters are murmuring about what should be decided when a monster named Mino says from here on, all they can do is put faith in their queen and the executives. In addition to the great hero, the formidable Van is here too. Plus, the legendary man Gold is also here. They wonder what in the world is happening down there. They can only imagine what sort of terrible scene is unfolding. However, down there, everyone is having a delicious feast. Sylvia suggests introducing each other first. She starts with introducing her daughter, Electra Munzi. Electra says she is an attendant to the great hero Prominence, aka Puyun. She is in charge of his personal affairs. She is happy to meet everyone. Van introduces himself as Prominence's childhood friend from his village. Ryuka says she is Van's childhood friend and Puyun friend too, the Black Dragon Queen. Puyun introduces himself as Prominence and that he is greatly indebted to Electra. Sylvia introduces herself as Electra's mother and Goldie's wife. And Goldie says he is Electra's father. He tells Puyun that he has heard quite a lot about him. Electra laughs, saying they live in a small world. Who would have guessed that the queen, Ryuka, knew her parents and Puyun as well? Ryuka jumps in, stating Puyun did say earlier that he would unearth her, making everyone go silent. Goldie asks Puyun what he means by that. Sylvia adds that this is such a frightful thing to say. Meanwhile, Puyun sits there scratching himself because of nervousness. Van tells Puyun that if it was an order, then the blame is not solely on Puyun's shoulder. He asks Puyun to help him understand the reason for aiming at Ryuka. Puyun explains that the dungeon bosses, the top-ranking monsters who rival heroes with remarkably high MP, are called the Demon King Vessels. His mission is to eradicate them, to prevent the return of the Demon King. 10 years ago, the Demon King was defeated by a hero from the West. But although his body was destroyed, his soul remained. It is out there somewhere, accumulating power as they speak. And that power source is the King's Vessels. By sacrificing the vessels, the Demon King will gain the power he needs to resurrect himself. Moreover, There is a prophecy about the next Demon King. Van asks about the prophecy. So Puyun explains that after 10 years of hiding in the shadows, the Demon King will overtake the Black Dragon to return in his ultimate form and destroy the very order of the world. This was prophesied by the mages of their imperial court, but they are hearing similar things from every kingdom. Van asks if Puyun is referring to Ryuka as the Black Dragon. Puyun replies that it is not necessary, but their chief policy is to preemptively nip all danger in the bud. He says that he agrees with the chief, so he resolved to subdue the dangerous vessels of the Demon King together with Elektra. That is why he came here today, to eradicate the prophesied Black Dragon. And Van asks Puyun if the only solution is to take Ryuka out himself. He says that there must be another way. Puyun says that the prophecy will come to fruition this year. If the Demon King returns and casualties ensure, it is already too late. To protect the people, he must get rid of Ryuka. Angry, Van says there is no way he will Puyun so that, but Puyun says this is something he needs to do. Golda asks the Puyun and Van to knock it off, stating they will only repeat the mistake of their last opposition. He suggests finding a resolution for everything, one by one. However, he raises a very important question and asks what Puyu is the nature of his connection with Elektra. Uji apologizes to Goldie, stating they are having a very important conversation regarding the fate of the world, but Goldie says that the fate of his loved ones come before the fate of the world. He says he is with Van's camp on this. Van comments that somehow he is not overly thrilled. Van asks Ryuka if she has anything to say, since this is serious stuff here. Turns out she isn't listening either. Ryuka tells Van that Elektra has a super nice body and she is cute, ooh. Elektra laughs, saying they are making her blush. She says she got his dad's physique. She stands up and tells Ryuka that she is much cuter. Sylvia adds that both of them are cuties. Puyun and Van look at the girl, thinking they are bonding with each other and ignoring everything else. Ryuka asks Elektra how exactly she met Puyun. Elektra explains that she was left in the care of the Imperial Guild they had connections to while her parents were off adventuring, and she witnessed Prominence's victory during the demon incident 5 years ago. She wished at the very instant that she could be his attendant, so she trained extra hard, and about 2 years after that, she joined the Great Heroes Party. Ever though, throughout traveling the world and competing with super strong enemies, every one of their allies has thrown in the towel. She thinks getting to travel alone with Prominence is a bonus. Sylvia finds it very cute, but Goldie is angry at the concept of Elektra traveling alone with Puyun. Angry, Goldie asks if this is like this. He says they can't happen and asks if they can move on. Elektra says this is more than fine with it being like that. Puyun asks Elektra not to give Goldie the wrong idea. Ryuka says it seems like their feelings are mutual. She asks why aren't they going out? Puyun says he, as a great hero, can't afford to be distracted by frivolous things. He is bound by so many obligations, and he doesn't want to drag Elektra into this, but Elektra says that none of the obligations matter to her. Golda asks Elektra to reconsider since her partner is a hero, and heroes who use their power and connections to live it up and womanize as much as they please. Sylvia asks Golda if it wasn't him who said that prejudice against heroes isn't good. Golda cannot see Elektra being associated with a guy like that. Van cannot stand this anymore. He defends his childhood friend Puyun, despite what he has done, and tells Goldie that Puyun is a good guy. He says Goldie can have his word. As his next-door neighbor, he is a bundle of kindness and upstanding morals. Puyun likes flowers. When they were kids, the village kids, who were also known as teasers, destroyed his flower garden, but he stood up to them all by himself. It was super brave of him. Puyun didn't win or anything since he interrupted and beat them up, embarrassed. Puyun asks Van to stop, but Van doesn't listen. He says he just realized another thing when they crossed swords, that Puyun is seriously giving his all. His strength doesn't just lie in his mana reserves, though his skills quite there yet. He saw undeniable signs of growth. This makes Wu think that Van is becoming Puyun's defense squad. Elektra also agrees with Van, stating even though Prominence is already the strongest here, as he still spends hours upon hours tirelessly studying the blade. She finds this very cool. She says that every time he receives an enormous reward from a kingdom after his mission, he donates the entire thing to the hospitals and orphanages. This shocks everyone, and they are stunned to hear the amazing wonders of Puyun. Embarrassed, Puyun interrupts them, stating they have got it all wrong. The training he doesn't eat anything special, and that much money and appropriate for someone like him, so that's why he give it away. Elektra adds that Puyun is humble too. That is what makes her support him more. to which Van agrees. Confused, Goldie asks Van why is he helping Puyun since he is his enemy. Van replies to Goldie saying that he may be the great hero's foe, but he is Puyun's friend. This makes Goldie even more angry. But our pure love advocate, Mino, interrupts Goldie saying he believes Puyun is a worthy man for his daughter. The quality of him is just like what Elektra and Van said. Moreover, he has built a trusting connection with Elektra. He talks a lot about their possibilities of a smooth future, making Goldie wonder if Minnie surely is enthusiastic about it. This makes Organ think that Minnie is a meddler, so he bets this is all a scheme to get those two together as soon as possible. To Goldie's surprise, Sylvia also likes Puyun as she says he is a nice guy, and that he reminds her of Goldie when they are younger. But Gold says he wasn't like Puyun when he was young. Angry Gold cannot take this all anymore. He challenges Puyun for opposition. He says unless Puyun doesn't prove that he is a very strong man, he is forbidden from seeing his daughter. But Puyun says he isn't sure if this is a good reason to compete. Van says Puyun is plenty strong. Ryuka and he had to work together to take Puyun down. Ryuka also agrees with Van and tells Puyun that this is his chance. Van realizes that he still needs to finish that decision from earlier. Elektra starts rooting for Puyun. With everyone rooting for him and Gold being against him, Puyun gets very worried about what to do. After some time, everyone leaves the dungeon except Puyun and Van. Van apologizes to Puyun for everything, but Puyun says he should be the one who is sorry. He said something awful and made things weird. Van asks Puyun what is he going to do now. Puyun replies saying he will have to head back to the capital to give his report on them. They will find out soon either way, so it is better he clarifies things first. Meanwhile, Elektra says goodbye to her parents while Gold lets her know to just tell him if Puyun does anything wrong. Van tells Puyun that if they know Golda is on par with the great hero, they are not going to come after him recklessly. Puyun replies saying sooner or later, they will take measures to bring down the Demon King themselves. When that happens, he will return to this place too. To his surprise, Van lets Puyun know that he can come back anytime, as he will be here. With the fear of the Demon King dawning, Puyun asks if Van wouldn't feel sorry for the other dungeon monsters if he was always coming around. With that, Puyun and Elektra make their final goodbyes and leave. This makes Van focus on the Demon King. On the other hand, the monsters are busy cleaning up the dungeon. They wish Puyun could help them out. After they all got to know about the Demon King's arrival, the monsters decide to have a meeting. Wool asks everyone if they know what today's meeting is all about. Mino explains that it is about the great hero's aim at them a few days ago. He and Van are on a different level. They were completely useless on that day. To think he was determined not to fall behind again. What a disgrace. The matter was resolved somehow, but if the great hero shows up again, they, as the executives, need to grind even harder to level up. Woo-Yun disagrees, stating they are here to talk about the cow and bird fetishes, shocking everyone. He tells Mino that he was making some crazy, wild assumptions about Puyun and that he disliked that. He says that Mino's idea of cucking is gross. Annoyed, Mino says he doesn't like cucking as a plot twist, however, he would worry about it happening, but Wu thinks that it is offensive to assume that in the first place. He asks Mino if he thinks something like that would happen. He asks if he has such little faith in Van and the Queen Ryuka. Crying, Mino says he knows that such things to happen are very unlikely, but if the possibility flashes through his brain for even a second, it is suddenly all he can think about. He wonders why is that even though he is a proponent of true love. He says his mind seems to have a mind of his own. Annoyed, Kun says, Mino's brain is getting cucked by the idea of cucking. The stupid bird, also known as Harpy, tells Mino that there is a thing called tact and asks Mino to keep his unpopular opinion to himself. Angry, Wool beats Harpy for misbehaving. He asks Harpy if she thinks she has room to talk. Every other word out of her mouth is an insult. Angry Harpy defends herself and says she is just letting the flood of thoughts she has about the adorable stuff spill out. But Wool says she is just spewing garbage. Angry Harpy calls Kun a stupid mutt. Wool was raised well. A wholesome environment cultivated a wholesome mind. He is so wholesome that people call him NHK. It looks like it is intended for a younger audience. Wool says that Mino's true love extremism and Harpy's very existence are unwholesome. They should be supporting their childhood friends with wholesome hearts. Harpy asks Wool not to validate her very existence like that. Kun agrees with Wool, asking Mino and Harpy to use a little more self-restraint. Angry, Mino asks if undesired submission can be wholesome. He calls Wool the king of garbage. Wool tells Kun that He had heard fetish is normally disturbing, but Orkun says that undesired submission can have several meanings. For instance, two childhood friends come into the dungeon, one being a girl and the other a boy. The girl apologizes to the boy, saying she wouldn't want to be in a party with a weakling like him. She says she is going to conquer the dungeon on her own and asks the boy not to follow her. Then she somehow managed to let her guard down. After competing with the monster and getting cornered, she asks the monster to stay back. But turns out the monsters have already captured the boy. Worried, she asks the boy how he got captured. She asks if he is trying to save her. The monsters begin to beat the boy up, making the girl cry. She screams and asks them to let the boy go, that the boy is very important to her and that they can take her instead of him. Orkun says in such situations the monsters let them go after that, so it is a happy ending. Shocked, Wool asks where's the happy ending since they are traumatized. Harpy says that Orkun is into some pretty dark stuff. It is not just her, they should hear some of the other monsters. Some of the monsters like tentacle bondage and some like to exchange bones. It is hard to choose between the irresistible lewd stuff and hardness of adamantine and the classiness of marble. Annoyed, Wolf says that he is surrounded by freaks. He asks to throw the whole dungeon out. It is time for him to crack down on this stuff and get rid of these thirsty monsters. But Harpy says that such kind of stuff is all about charm. It can be big puppy eyes, underarms, tan skin, fangs, ponytail, horns, etc. Fetishistic aspects are vital elements that everyone can agree makes their favorites even more alluring. Angry, Wool says that they can support their favorite without all this crap, but Harpy replies saying that thoroughly investigating the skeletons in the closet because they are his favorite is part of being a fan. She says she is pretty sure Van and Ryuka have a fetish too, but Wool doesn't agree with her. He says that Van and Ryuka are the pictures of wholesome innocence. They won't do anything dirty until they get married. And, Orkun interrupts saying this has nothing to do with fetishness. Harpy suggests taking a look at Van and Ryuka right now to check if they have any fetish, to which Wool agrees. Meanwhile, Ryuka and Van are discussing the Great Hero and the Demon King. She says that since she is stuck down here, their only option is to ambush her, as always. She looks at Van and asks if he is okay, since this is a lot harder on him than her, since he has known Puyun for so long. But Van says that he is alright, and asks her not to worry about him. The monsters are staring at Ryuka and Van in the lookout for fetishes. In this soft, sad atmosphere, Wool doesn't think they should do this, but Harpy says that she is sure these two have some kind of fetish, and asks the rest of the monsters to observe closely. She says that the looks they give to each other, their expressions, and the tone of their voice, she asks everyone to use every bit of information to suspect the perversion. Minot asks Harpy if she found anything. After some observation, Harpy wonders if the queen has a fetish for the collarbone, as she can be seen staring at Van's collarbone. Van also notices it and asks Ryuka what is going on with her, because of which she turns away, concerned. Wool thinks that this has to be some sort of misunderstanding. Orkun says there is nothing wrong with a collarbone fetish. Harpy asks Wool to have a look again since it is all so obvious. Van's voice and his arms' nerves popping is something that fascinates Ryuka. Van looks at her asking if there is something on his face, but facing away, Ryuka denies it and says it is nothing. Wool is shocked to see that the Lady Dragon is surprisingly dirty-minded. He wonders if he was wrong all along. At the Four Idiots' private bar, the monsters continue with their discussion. Harpy says that it is a universal truth that morally righteous characters secretly have a mind full of fantasies. She asks Wool to have some drinks now, since he has lost. Wool takes a large gulp, then says, he thinks that when lovers hold hands for the first time, the initial gentle brush of their fingers together before they startle back is erotic. And this is what he finds erotic. Minot asks Wool to tell them more about it. Wool says he likes tails. He says he finds it cute when the queen gets worked up and her tail swishes around. Harpy agrees with Wool as she finds Queen's tail cute too. Orkun says they are exposing everything tonight, and they all drink together. The next day, Van comes back to see Ryuka when he asks about Minot and the rest of the monsters. He says he didn't see them anywhere today. Minot comes in letting Ryuka know that he bought Baki. Harpy is excited about this game while Van and Ryuka wonder what is Baki. Minot explains that it is a party game using Baki. Minot explains that they hold the Baki in their mouth at either end and eat it together. Whoever pulls away first when it breaks is the loser. Annoyed, Ryuka asks Minot what kind of game is this. She asks if he is trying to screw them. Harpy explains that the winner gets all the next week's snacks to themselves. With that, Ryuka and Van ended up playing the game. The two hold the Bokian mouths from both ends. Ryuka thinks that she is doing all this for the snacks and nothing else, while their heartbeat raises to a concerning rate. As the game starts, the van starts to eat up the Boki, closing the gap with zero hesitation. Blushing, Ryuka wonders why is Van going so fast. She thinks that this is Van, who traverses the dungeon daily, the guy who expertly fields 1,000 arrows before their very eyes. The distance between his mouth and the back is no problem for him, but it results in no personal space with Ryuka. Van chomps the Baki while thinking there is still a lot of room left. Meanwhile, Ryuka is panicking since Van is way too close to her. She thinks that she has to pull away or they will end up embracing each other. She wonders if he is planning to make love to her. She thinks she is never something like this, but if it is Van, she thinks she will be okay. However, at the end, she ends up snorting. Van is stunned as that was very close. Harpy announces that Ryuka wins. She won the opposition, but still lost it. On just another regular day, Van marches forward, beating every monster along his way to meet his childhood best friend, Ryuka. He slams and bams all the high-ranked monsters in an instant to hang out with Ryuka and go to the lowest level of Worm's Hell. Van is a swordman, but he doesn't even carry a sword anymore. Mino tells Ryuka about how Van defeated them today unarmed. He says he has been entirely unarmed lately, even though his Saurode is very strong. Wool wonders what with the sudden switch though. Ryuka says it might be because Van broke his sword not long ago when competing with Puyun. Mino says that he thinks it is just a trial and not an error period for him. Orkun says that Van's opponent was the sacred sword-wielding great hero. No ordinary sword could hold up against that. Ryuka thinks a little and concludes to make a new super-duper strong sword for Van. Mino thinks this is a little too much, but Ryuka says that Van has already been to the lowest level like 100 times, so she thinks he has earned a rare item. Orkun says that if Ryuka gives Van a strong sword, they will have to suffer as they are beaten every day by him. But everyone is already happy about it and all the monsters are ready to help out. Mimino says they don't have any sword on par with a sacred sword around here. Orkun says he knows a guy who can make a strong sword. He says that among his subordinates, there is a dwarf who is an expert in making such tools. He suggests commissioning that dwarf bladesmith. Just then, the dwarf barges in front of the queen, Ryuka. He asks Orkun if he has summoned him. Mino is shocked to see the dwarf's service. First, he barges into a large stone monster form, but soon turns into a dwarf. Orkun greets the dwarf, Dwao, the head of the traps division, as well as their tools and golem manufacturer. Orkun explains that Dwao produces all the traps and combat golems Van has encountered below the 45th floor. Dwao is the definition of a tool specialist. He looks more like a scientist than a bladesmith, and a mad one at that. Dwao says that when it comes to designing tools, he is the best. However, Van destroys his creations every day without breaking a sweat. He swears he will make the van down himself someday. This makes Well question if Orkun is sure about commissioning Dwao to make a sword for Van. Orkun says Dwao also makes tools for his golems. His knowledge edge and skill with blades is top-notch. Orkun says that the only one who doesn't know about Van and Ryuka's connection is Dwao, since he has zero interest in such stuff. Dwao explains that he typically has no interest in making swords and such for other people. However, if it results in giving guys like the legendary man and the great hero a taste of misery, and Van battles oppose the great hero with a blade of his creation, even the thought makes Dwao fire up. With that, Van's sword production committee is made. Dwao explains to everyone that a sacred sword is the strongest tool a hero can possess, and the great hero's sacred sword, Calendula, is the best of the best. The ultra-high output of mana and heat melts away whatever comes in contact with it. They need to devise a sword that can rival it, so for that, he asks everyone to come up with some ideas. Mina starts first. He says he is the one who competes with Van the most. He builds a sketch of a fanfic scenario showcasing Van's new sword where Van is protecting Ryuka. Ryuka clarifies that she doesn't need to be protected, she can compete with her opposition. Harpy thinks that this is kind of dreamy, but they can either agree or disagree. Wool says that the important thing is to make a sword that withstands heat. Wool and Goo come up with an idea for Van's sword. They suggest making a super frosty sword. It can release cold air useful in hot weather. Ice cream hilt, which can be eaten when fatigued. The cone portion shouldn't be cold though, and it should be made with -100-degree freezing ice. Shocked, Harpy asks Wall if he is 23 years old. Dwao says that the ice will melt. Harpy replies saying they will enchant it to be in a perpetual frozen state. And while they are at it, she will engrave a power enchantment onto it. Ryuka likes the idea of enchantments, a shockwave hurling, high-frequency wave. She says this is what she calls dreamy. Dwao is relieved that Ryuka finally gets it. Orca says they don't need anything like that. Upon asking, he asks everyone to take a look at the monitor. He shows them the footage from their previous opposition. Van can be seen competing with Mino. Mino is ready to unleash his abilities at maximum strength. His battle axe is even enchanted, but Van, his unarmed Ains might as well be enchanted. Mino, Harpy, and Wool look at the footage and think that Van is a monster. Wow and Orkun look at each other with a smirk. Then Dwao's mood changes. He wasn't expecting a Chalcom fanboy in front of him. He bet that Orichalcum should be used for everything. It is stupidly expensive. Orikun calls Dwao the nostalgia-blinded geezer. He asks Dwao to think of the difference in performance. Surprised, Mino asks how they got so heated up suddenly. Harpy says that both are notoriously rare metals. The discourage, which is stronger, continues endlessly. Orichalcum is extremely strong, magic-resistant, and lightweight. Mithril is extraordinarily strong, mana-resistant, and lightweight. Orkun says that the village uses orichalcum to make a hero's sword, but Dwao says that Mithril is more beautiful since he is the one who made it in the first place. Worried, Wool suggests stopping Dwao and Orkun first, and then thinking about the sword. The robotic figure says she would recommend adamantine. They three are continuously arguing now when Ryuka realizes that they are not going anywhere with this, so she suggests mixing them all, shocking Orkun and Dwao. She apologizes and says she doesn't know what they are talking about. Orkun agrees with Ryuka, stating this is it. Dwao is also excited about mixing the two and making an orichalcum and mithril adamantine alloy. Orkun says no one has successfully made an orichalcum alloy, so using heat alone won't work, but if they use black dragon scales as the base materials and forge them with chaos flames to combine them all, they could make the strongest alloy ever. Dwao says the main point is the black dragon scale and flames are essential for this. He adds that Ryuka's mana is strong enough to endure grabbing the great hero's sword. They will combine these metals using the mightiest of magical materials, that is the black dragon scales. Shocked, Ryuka asks if they want her to give a part of her body to Van. She asks, isn't that kind of gross? It is like mixing the saliva into handmade chocolate. Dwao thinks that this is the most girly example he could have heard that day, but Ryuka replies, saying she is a girl. Dwao and Orkun bow in front of Ryuka, stating, for the benefit of Van's sword, all they need is one scale and a single puff of fire. And so with their plan solidified, Ryuka's team commenced sword production. They all got together. Ryuka provided them with the scales and flames. Dwao asks Ryuka for more firepower. He asks her to unleash the flames of fury, but Ryuka says she can't just get angry, so the Harpy helps Ryuka out. She asks if Ryuka could mix some sweat into the sword while she is at it. Angry, Ryuka fires the flame of fury, stating she's going to turn Harpy into a furnace. After so much effort, their first attempt didn't go exactly as planned. They made mistake after mistake, but they never gave up, all for the sake of childhood friends, for the sake of their ambition, and the sake of Lady Dragon Queen. Several days later, the sword is finally ready. Ryuka is happy to see the sword and thinks they finally have a winner. The robotic figure says that Van will certainly be pleased with this. Ryuka suggests taking the sword to Van right away, but Dwao stops her, saying he made extraordinary effort to build this sword. It wouldn't be fitting to just hand it over. Mino asks Ryuka to leave it all to them, as they have an excellent idea. Ryuka looks at them, saying their ominous looks are giving her a bad feeling about this. Turns out they have made a new floor just to give Van his new present. As decided, Ryuka tells Van that she is adding a new secret floor in the dungeon. She came up with a floor only he could enter under certain conditions. To get in, he needs to be in a person party, traps are all set accordingly, and there is some rare treasure hidden in its depth. So, for this test, it is going to be her and Van going together on an adventure. Van agrees with the condition and waits for Ryuka to come out. After some waiting, Ryuka finally comes to meet Van, all dressed up. Van is amazed by Ryuka having the adventure look, to which Ryuka says she needs to try to be part of this adventure first. Van says that going adventuring together reminds him of when they were little. He asks Ryuka what kind of treasure he should be expecting. Ryuka replies, saying that he will have to wait and see for himself. As they are about to enter the floor, the monsters take a peek at them and get excited. A new adventure is about to begin. As they enter the entryway to the new floor, Van is getting hyped. Ryuka thinks that she knows she did all this just to gift a sword, but it is like a special dungeon outing with Van. She remembers the time when she accidentally tripped and fell on Van and hopes something like that might happen again. Just then, they hear a voice and realize their first trap is here. It turns out to be a wall filled with sharp, pointy nails. Van and Ryuka run to save themselves. Concerned, Ryuka questions why is this trap trying to unearth them, to which Van asks why she is surprised. Ryuka says she left the traps to Orkun and Kun. Van asks if he can destroy the trap, but Ryuka doesn't allow it. To see the exit near and run to get away from the pointy wall. Somehow Van manages to escape, but Ryuka lands on a glue-like liquid. Concerned, Van quickly comes to check up on Ryuka, asking if she is all right. Ryuka thinks that she is all right, as it is just a slime. However, her costume dissolves. Turns out it is a slime that only dissolves costumes. Orkun says he had a feeling that something like that might happen. Annoyed, Ryuka quickly covers herself and decides to get out of there as soon as possible. Dwao says that the queen is getting played like a fiddle. That is the boss man for them. Ryuka somehow manages to escape and only a part of her costume is dissolved. Worried, she says that she is going through it. Van announces that they have already reached the next obstacle, which turns out to be a twister. Ryuka gets mad while going through this obstacle, as the two have to put their heads together to make it through the rest of the 4 rom-com traps. At last, Van finally reaches the gift. He asks Ryuka if this sword is the treasure, to which she agrees. Mino takes a peek at them, thinking that this is his time to shine now. He hopes that Van reads the inscription, which states that this sword will only be pulled out by 2 working as one. He hopes to see a lovey-dovey moment, but instead, Ryuka cracks the rock holding the sword, and Van takes out the sword. Van likes the sword and asks Ryuka if he can keep it. Obviously, Ryuka agrees. She explains that this is the Azure Dragon sword, Blue Star. Orkun adds that it is like the great hero's calendula. It bears the name of a flower that represents true love. Harpy is excited about all this. She says that is how the queen feels about Van and wonders if Ryuka is asking Van out. Wool looks at Harpy, stating she is reading way too much into this. As everyone thinks that the adventure is over, it turns out that Dwao still has some traps left for Ryuka and Van. With that, as Van holds the sword, everything starts to shake like crazy. A new golem comes out of the ground, shocking everyone. Dwao explains that he used the Queen's Flames and their leftover metal to make a new model of golem, G965. He built it to be a simulated great hero, but it exceeded expectation. With any luck, it will bring Van down here and now. Mino says that in the past 10 years, Van has destroyed almost 1,000 golems. Harpy realizes that this is why Dwao is so hell-bent on this. Van realizes that this must be the old man's new golem. He thinks that since he has a new sword, he can test it out on this new golem, while Dwao orders the golem to crush Van into pieces. The other monsters are worried since the queen is also there. With that, Van swings the sword at the golem, cracking the golem in the process. Van is surprised by the swiftness of the sword and praises how it glides through the air by swinging it. Dwao is happy that Van likes the sword he built, while Ryuka gets worried and asks Van not to swing the sword towards her, and tells him that the golem is coming for him from behind. Van is excited about the fact that there is no crack on the sword, even after such a strong aim at the golem. Dwao is glinting like crazy at this point. He is proud of his invention of statin muthrol, or calcum. Adamantite and the queen's scales were combined without degrading their performance. He thinks that he should call it the true dragon steel. It even passed the queen's durability test. Van says that the hilt is smooth and easy to grip. Wool is surprised to see that Van is giving a review on the sword in the middle of the opposition. Dwao explains to the monsters that for the grip kelpie, hide is far and away the best material to use with swords. Harpy says that Dwao is answering Van just as sincerely. She can't tell if Dwao is happy or frustrated, and on the cherry on top, the sword is enchantment resistant. Van manages to repel the enchantment from the golem by creating a shock. Orkun proudly explains to the monsters that this is because of parry coating. If it is struck by a blade, it unleashes a shockwave. Van can control the shockwave at his own will. It is an all-purpose enchantment that can be used for defense and countering too. WoW adds that wielding it at the moment requires absolute expertise. Let's see if Van can handle it. Mino looks at Dwao, thinking he is a guy with no chill. Meanwhile, Van is competing with the golem. He wonders if he can unleash the shockwave, and with that, he swings his blade and gives it a try. He decides that the instant his blade is struck, it should send a shockwave from one side to the other. He will channel his strength here and drive it through. And just like that, boom, Van gives the striking slash while still using his fist. Annoyed, Dwao cannot hold back his feelings since Van figured out how the sword worked on the spot and devised a plan to apply it. However, he laughs, stating this is what he would have expected. This is precisely why Van is worth defeating. He says that he is not going to give up. Next time, he will bring him down with his strongest golem. At the same instance, the monsters realize that from tomorrow on, they will be getting pummeled with that sword. They got too caught up in making it that they completely forgot. After the opposition is over, Ryuka asks Van how is the new sword. Excited, Van replies to her saying he really likes it. The sword is great. He learned a new technique too. He will get even stronger now. Mino looks at the excitement of Van, realizing that he is already scared now. Van looks at Ryuka smiling and asks if she made this sword just for him. Taken aback, Ryuka asks why is he asking about this all of a sudden. Van points at the blade stating, "'Cause there is an engraving on the blade which says to Van, with all her love." Shocked, Ryuka freaks out at the monsters. Ryuka clarifies that this isn't some grand gesture or anything. It is just that he has been coming here unarmed latterly, so now he doesn't have to worry about getting a sword. Van explains that he was just trying to save some money by not buying a new sword since he breaks a lot of them. He thanks Ryuka for the gift and tells her that he is super happy about it. Ryuka is glad that Van likes the sword and asks him to be careful with it. The monsters are also happy. Since their queen got to enjoy a little special outing, they think that they did an amazing job. Dwao is also happy because he got to create a new golem. However, when Mino checks the production cost, everyone is shocked and cannot believe the number to be real. Harpy wonders if this golem costs them a national budget. Angry Orkun says that this is all because Dwao used an alloy for his golem. He asks for an explanation from Dwao. Dwao says he has done everything that he wanted to do with the rare metals. With that, he launches his heart and flees the place. Meanwhile, in the royal capital of Kara Kingdom, the great hero Pu Yun gets back. Those who know Prominence respect him a lot there. They offer him fresh fish, flowers, and whatnot, while the ones who don't know him call him villainous and think that he is pulling some string behind the scenes. Elektra is annoyed by the people who call Prominence a bad guy and decides to teach them a lesson. But every time, Pu Yun stops her, stating this is all part of his job. He reminds her that they are here to report to the king about what happened in the dungeon. As they come face to face with the Majesty, the king praises Prominence and Elektra for their last mission. Prominence is about to explain what happened when the head of the kingdom's 7 heroes, K-Fate, says it seems like he failed to defeat the Black Dragon. The 7 heroes say that he has put them in a big problem, if that is true. They ask what happened to the guy on par with himself. There is no way someone like him would show any mercy to the end. The prophesied Black Dragon must be eliminated. The 7 heroes ask for an explanation from Prominence. They are shocked to learn that the Black Dragon was his childhood friend. Worried, they ask Prominence to hang in there as it might be very difficult for him. Concerned, Prominence reminds the 7 heroes that they are still in his majesty. The king cries, stating he accidentally ordered Prominence to unearth his childhood friend. He apologizes to Prominence, clarifying that it was never his intention. Kefayed asks the Majesty to calm down. The 7 heroes mutter about the situation inside the dungeon. They find the situation outrageous. They flew completely under the radar. Prominence explains that the dungeon has a total of at least 2,000 monsters, and the elite executives are on par with the Demon King vessels. The Black Dragon, of course, goes without saying, but the problem is Van Sirius, the childhood friend of both, him and the Black Dragon. The 7 heroes are shocked to see that Van is equal to the great hero, the strongest warrior in the world. It sounds like they would get annihilated. Still, they need to give it a try. The prophecy of the Demon King's return is about to come true in a year. The Majesty asks if their kingdom is screwed. Kefayed asks the Majesty not to speak so casually. She says that Van is the issue at hand, troublesome as his strength may be. They won't even get close to the Black Dragon if they won't deal with him first. The Majesty asks if they can bring Van to their side, but Prominence says that it is not possible. Van will undoubtedly become their enemy the moment Ryuka is aimed at them. The Majesty thinks that there is no effective way to compete against them. Prominence asks the Majesty not to worry about it. Although Van and Ryuka are good friends of his, he swore an oath to protect this kingdom and its people. Next time, he won't hesitate. Kefayed and the rest are shocked to hear Prominence's words. Kefayed praises Prominence for his truthfulness. She asks Prominence for any kind of information that might ease the competition. She asks Elektra if she gathered any intel, to which Elektra agrees, saying they were nice people. She liked them so much that she couldn't bear to compete with them now. She was even given the Lady Dragon's cookies as a souvenir. This makes the 7 heroes think that accepting food from enemies is a bit risky. But the Majesty eats the cookies anyways. Annoyed, Cafade asks Electra if she has anything concerning Van and the Black Dragon. Electra says she does and explains that those two are in love with each other. Interested, the Majesty asks for more details from Electra, confusing Cafade. Electra says that the atmosphere there is very sweet. The Queen's followers are watching over them warmly all the time. The signs from Ryuka are unmistakable at this point. Van too. He's been going down to the lowest level of the dungeon every month for 10 years without fail. Majesty thinks that Van's feelings must be quite serious as well. And like that, Electra completely takes over the room as she talks about the love story of Van and Ryuka. This makes the 7 heroes say to Kafai that having to listen to gossips like that is exhausting. They wonder how Prominence does it, but Kafide says that this information is quite beneficial. Those feelings of young love can be used to take down the enemy from the inside, surprising everyone. But Prominence interrupts Kayfade, stating, "This is not what a hero does," he says. "No matter how indebted he is to her, he won't let her do that." But one of the 7 heroes tells Prominence that there is no use in getting worked up. Prominence tells Kayfade that this is the reason she is 30 years old and still doesn't have anyone to rely on. She is an excellent senior, but when it comes to love and all, she is a failure. Angry, Cafade asks Prominence to watch his mouth. Cafade says that carrying out missions comes before all else for them as heroes. They have no time for trifling distractions like love. But Electra doesn't agree with Cafade. She says it is possible to give her absolute best, all to both love and their duties, just like she and Prominence do. Angry, Cafed says she doesn't approve of their association with each other. This makes Electra angry as she says Cafed is sounding like her papa. She says they met up with her parents. Embarrassed, Prominence asks Electra not to discuss that part, but Electra doesn't listen. She tells everything about how Ryuka said they make a good partnership. This makes Prominence blush, while the rest of the hero make fun of him, saying he becoming more cozy with the enemy. They ask if this is the part he likes about Electra. The Majesty also tells Prominence that he is rooting for him. Their #1 supporter is right here. Cafeid says that the Demon King's return is imminent. They must be sure to defeat the Black Dragon, who is a vessel. Presently, she will take care of launching a top-secret investigation into Van and Ryuka. She asks everyone to do what they need to do to prepare for the coming opposition, and then to increase their competition power. The hero who defeated the previous Demon King, the hero from the West, and his comrades, called upon them a long time ago. None of the 7 heroes are shocked, as those are some great contacts to have. But another hero reminds the rest of the heroes that they were the one who fought the last Demon King. Kafid agrees, but reminds everyone that she lost at that time and steps away. Prominence follows Kafid. Kafid stops midway and asks what is his problem. Prominence tries to do something regarding Ryuka and Van, but Kafid interrupts him, asking if he wants to spare them. She says this is what he has been talking about all along. She reminds him that to be worthy of the great hero title, he must put his personal feelings aside. Prominence says that as the great hero, he will defeat Van and Ryuka, and that hasn't changed. That's why, as regular Van's neighbor Prominence, he has a request. He wants Akfade to find a way to thwart the prophecy without damaging either of them. Kafade says there's no way through this without anyone getting destroyed. She asks Prominence to understand how little time they have left. They will do the best they can within their limits. She says saving Prominence's friends isn't the top priority, but she will still keep this in her mind. However, she does have one condition. She shows 3 portraits of a woman, stating, from the right, the cabinet minister's niece, the baroness's younger sister, and the daughter of the neighboring kingdom royalty. Out of these, she will choose a suitable spouse for the great hero. However, for now, he will have to carry out his professional duties. She will have him wait about 10 years for the actual marriage. Shocked, Prominence asks Kafade if she's skipping a few steps. Electra hears everyone and says, she won't allow this. She is the daughter of Gold, the legendary man. She has prestige. Kafade asks Electra to be silent. The Majesty also interrupts them, asking Kafade if she is trying to be in his bad people books, as he supports Prominence and Electra. Tensed, Prominence realizes that the corners of his mouth are freezing up again. On the other hand, inside the 45th floor of the dungeon's hell, for a long time a veteran guardian has been burning. Inferno Ogre has been guarding this floor against the adventurers, but now he has become the boss of Ogre Organ's dungeon. To the opposition, the 4 idiots had won. Thus, the position of the floor guardian is currently vacant. And now, to choose the new floor guardian, monsters of the next generation have gathered. A few days ago, Orkun decided to have a selection exam to nominate the guardian of floor 45. Each floor boss can nominate someone. He tells one of the monsters that he has been nominated by him. The monsters wish the best of luck to the new guardian named Pan. They call him the rising star of the lower floors. Pan didn't want to be the guardian, but he couldn't say no. And with that, he had that selection exam where he wonders to think that things turn out like this. It is all his fault for enjoying being a monster and an adventurer at the same time. Pan comes face to face with a self-nominated monster called Lich. Lich is surprised to see a low-ranking monster in a place like this. He asks Pan if he is the gob's favorite. He laughs, saying Pan has got guts to not be intimidated by him. But he doesn't belong here. This exam is for an elite like him, the current boss of floor 40. Angry, Wool asks Lich not to tease everyone and badmouth about each other. Just then, Lich asks Wool if he is all right. Just then, Wool sneezes, stating he had a cold since yesterday. Mino comes in as well and announces that the selection test to choose the next boss of floor 45 will begin. To prepare for the return of the great heroes and foreign invaders, the dungeon must strengthen its defenses. The monsters discuss how the floor 45 has always been an impenetrable shield against adventurers, except for a few exceptions. There is something wrong with those exceptions. They hope that the new shield will come from among the nominated ones. Mino says what they need for the guardian of this floor is the power to overwhelm an upper-ranked class adventurer party and instill a sense of despair, making them unable to advance further. In the first test, the monsters will have to show their abilities. Orkun adds that these golems have the same strength and ability of an A-rank party. They will be judged on how well they can subdue them based on artistic merit. Due to Wormhell's rules, their points will be deducted if they inflict serious damage to them. He adds that the creator Dwao said that he will unearth anyone who destroys his golems. Minot says they will start the test now and asks the monsters to step forward when their name is called. With that, the test begins. A half-human, half-spader comes in first, destroying the golems. Then a three-shaped snake monster comes and destroys the golems very easily. Then, it's Lich's turn, who turns out to be quite good, but Harpy thinks that Lich's personality is a bit flawed. It is almost Pan's turn now. He wonders that if he becomes the boss, he won't have time to play with Ryuka and he won't be able to continue adventuring. He thinks that he needs to find a way to fail, but if he fails on purpose, it will be rude to Gob, who nominated him. Pan, who is Van, wonders if it is okay for a newbie like him to take this exam. Pan remembers what Gob would say if he didn't pass. Gob was like, he already didn't expected him to pass. The worm's hell is full of talented monsters after all. He feels bad to nominate Pan without asking, but though that it would be a good opportunity for him to gain experience. With that, Pan decides to give his best even if he fails. Pan decides to compete like he usually does without unearthing the golems, just like how he does when visiting Ryuka. With that, he uses his full power and aims at the golems, making them fly in the air. Soon he realizes that he messed up. Mino can sense that Pan is Van already. Van also realizes that Mino and the rest already know his moments very well. They might have figured out who he was. After defeating the golems, the monsters appraise Pan for his success. Mino says that the damage to the golem was minimal, which scores high for style. Van is surprised that no one noticed who was Pan. Lich tells Pan that he's that bad. He asks, why does Pan look so down? Gol announces that the first test owes over. After some calculations, 3 monsters have passed the test. The floor 36 Hydra, the floor 40 Lich, and floor 1 Pan. Gol says that these 3 will face a second test, which is an interview tomorrow. The chosen one will become the new boss of the floor 45. Ryuka explains that she will be the examiner for that interview tomorrow. Later, Ryuka explains to Van that she will be swamped tomorrow, and so does Van, but Ryuka looks at Pan and asks why is he so pale. As they both talk, Mino and the rest of the monsters discuss about the test. Mino is surprised to see that Hydra passed the test. Their movements are sharper than usual. Orkun mentions that Lich is best when it comes to versatility. Wool says that it has to be Pan from floor 1. Having Gob's endorsement is big, but Harpy says they can't play their favorites. Meanwhile, Van wonders what is he going to do tomorrow. Hydra is also shocked about the test. She calls it lame since no one noticed her true identity. Just then a monster comes in asking Hydra, also known as Oju, if they are doing this. Oju agrees, saying tomorrow Ryuka will also be there as an examiner, so this is the perfect opportunity. The Black Queen Obsidian, the one who destroyed her clan, will never forgive her. Oju says that the worm's hell belongs to her. The poison dragon princess Venura Vermilion. The next day, the selected monsters are asked to introduce themselves in order. Ryuka instantly realizes Van and wonders why is he here disguised as a monster and joins the interview. Van also realizes that only Ryuka notices him. He thinks that it is almost a relief. He hopes to explain things to her later. Starting with Lich, Lich introduces himself as the one from floor 40. When it comes to Pan, Van looks at Ryuka smiling weirdly and wonders what's with that look. Ryuka wonders she doesn't know what Van is up to. But seeing Van panicking is entertaining. She decides to just keep going and watch. Van also thinks that it seems like Ryuka is having too much fun seeing him in a tight spot. Lich asks Pan to introduce himself as it is his turn. Quickly, Pan introduces himself as Pan in a low voice while almost uttering his real name. This makes Ryuka laugh a little. Wool asks Pan if he is nervous as it can be heard in his voice. Harpy also tells Pan that he won't be able to make it as a monster, and it is true in every dungeon. Manhwa suggests starting the interview. He asks the first question, which is when they become the boss of floor 45, what kind of vision do they have for how it should be operated? He starts with Lich. Lich explains that he will first find cute girls and make a harem. Next, he will decorate the floor with a Lich-themed palace. Manhwa is surprised as they just started and Lich is already revealing his true identity. Lich adds that if he gets promoted from being the boss of floor 45 to floor 45, then a harem will no longer be a dream. Orkun says that won't make a difference. He asks Lich to improve his personality before he improves his rank. Angry, Mino clarifies that a harem is unacceptable. In typical harem endings, childhood friend types are treated unfairly. He only approves of routes where childhood friends are the favorites. Harpy reminds Mino that he is revealing his desires to make him stop talking. Orkun says that they are not asking about Lich's desires. They are asking about the opposition plans for the floor. Lich says that he will be using bones if he is aimed with some kind of rocking rhythm. It will break the adventurers' souls. Orkun says that Lich has got the skills, but his narcissism is an issue. He is not getting the sense of responsibility those who serve Lady Dragon Queen should have. Harpy wonders if they should put him on lower floors instead. Shocked, Lich asks Harpy what is she talking about. Mino decides to move forward and asks Pan to come forward now. Van wonders what he should do to make a good working environment like on the first floor, but then realizes that he is supposed to fail the test. He thinks that if he does the exact opposite of the first floor, it should leave a bad impression. He decides to say that he will just wait for the opposition to come. Wool is surprised as Pan is the complete opposite of Lich. Orkun says that after defeating the countless monsters, the adventurers are wounded but press onward, and then they see what awaits them. The monsters are happy to hear Pan's answer, and somehow interpreted this all in a positive way. Harpy says she has heard that Pan is currently working on the first floor. She asks about his working conditions or if there are any complaints to be made, but Pan says there are no complaints. The leader, Gob, and the rest of the monsters are very kind. It is a fulfilling place to work. He adds that when he started, he was a rookie who didn't know his right from left. But Gob saves great guidance on how to analyze opponents, how to compete, how to lose properly, and how to manage adventure conditions. He has been a great mentor to him. This makes Ryuka wonder what was Van doing in secret all this time. Pan says that thanks to his experience on the first floor, he has an appreciation for the hard work and the attentiveness of monsters. He says he came to love this kind of dungeon and everyone in the worm's hell even more. This makes Ryuka spit out the water from her mouth, making the other monsters wonder if she is all right. She wasn't expecting such a beautiful answer from Van, while Wool wonders if Ryuka also caught a cold. Lich is also crying at this point, saying that Pan is a very good kid. But Hydra asks what is with this kind of dungeon. The floor 45 that she wants doesn't have any shallow nonsense like that. She says she will revive the Poison Tane area. Poison dragons see owed blood here. Van says he has never heard of this level. Lich explains to Pan that it is the old floor 45. It used to be ruled by poison monsters, but when the Lady Dragon Queen took over, she abolished it for being too dangerous. Orkun tells Hydra that it has already been decided that they will no longer use poison against the adventurers. Will also asks why would she want to revive the position. Hydra says she will reclaim her pride. Not just floor 45, she will become the ruler of Worm's Hell. With that, a blast occurs, shocking everyone. Terrified, Lich holds onto Pan, asking what is happening. Mino explains that this smoke is because of the poison. He asks everyone to fall back. Ojo comes at Ryuka and grabs her. All the poison monsters of the Worm's Hell are here. Ojo introduces herself to Ryuka, stating she is Venora Vermilion. the poison dragon princess, the one who will defeat her and take over Wyrm's Hell. Ryuka and the rest are shocked to see Lady Venora in front of them. She is the poison dragon lord, an aide to the former dragon king, Vermilion's one and only daughter. Mino is angry to see the rebellions coming out like this. They are about to come forward to compete when one of the poison monsters tells them that if they try to damage their poison smoke, he will spread the poison through their entire body. He asks them to stay right there and keep quiet. Van is about to interrupt when Ryuka stops him, stating this is between Venora and her. Venora says she has been waiting for this moment. She disguised herself as Hydra to catch her off guard, and now she managed to corner her. But Ryuka says that this is nothing. She says this hardly counts as being cornered. But Venora says she wonders if Ryuka will still be able to say that after she exposes her secret to the human called Van. Venora says that Ryuka gave it away during the dungeon's opposition. Only a select few may approach the Dragon Queen's chambers. Meanwhile, someone her age has been entering Wyrm's Hell for years, Van, and no one knows just how far he has progressed through the dungeon. Venora says that when she connected the dots, the answer was here. She says she has finally uncovered Ryuka's weakness. She asks Ryuka if she and Van are lovers, shocking everyone as they are not there yet. Venora says that Ryuka has been mistreating the poison monsters while living a lovey-dovey life with an enemy, a human. She says that Ryuka is unfit to rule this dungeon. She will defeat Ryuka and make Wyrm's Hell truly powerful. Angry, Ryuka converts into her dragon form, stating she and Van aren't seeing each other or anything like that. She and Van are super pissed at Venora for what she has done.